Hey everyone, tonight we're stepping straight into one of history's most peculiar costume parties. The daily existence of a 1950s housewife, where the greatest dangers to your survival aren't wild animals, highway bandits, or bubonic plague, but mismatched salad forks and the horrifying possibility that you may have, brace yourself, neglected to press the bed sheets. Yes, this is a universe where etiquette isn't merely a recommendation. It's an extreme sport, and the penalty for misplacing your white gloves could mean social banishment, mild marital disappointment, or the spontaneous evaporation of your neighbor's respect. So before you drift off tonight, take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what we're doing here. Drop a comment letting me know where you're tuning in from and what time it is wherever you are. Now, dim those lights, switch on a fan for some gentle, non-judgmental background noise, and get comfortable. Maybe arrange a few decorative throw pillows around you for that authentic mid-century suburban energy. Let's pause for a second. Have you ever genuinely wondered what it felt like to live as a post-war housewife? How many pairs of gloves did a woman actually need just to pick up groceries? Was there an official manual for consuming gelatin with suspended fruit pieces? What happened if your skirt hem was a quarter inch off the mark? Would you face neighborhood excommunication for serving canned soup at a dinner gathering? Or was that actually a sign of modern sophistication? Could anyone survive a plastic storage container party without fainting from polite enthusiasm? Would you rather face a medieval charging bear than explain to your mother-in-law why your window curtains clashed with the tablecloth? And now, congratulations. You've just woken up in a split-level suburban home somewhere in 1956. The linoleum is gleaming, your pearl necklace is fastened, and your morning coffee is probably carrying just a whisper of existential dread. Best of luck to you. Before you can even attempt breakfast, you're already confronting a textile emergency. Which gloves belong to which occasion? There's a glove designated for church, a glove assigned for shopping errands, a glove reserved for dusting the piano, and if you're feeling particularly adventurous, a scandalously abbreviated glove for cocktail hour. Each one communicates less about keeping your hands warm and more about silently broadcasting that you understand the social code, and more critically, that you can identify a faux pas from 20 paces away. Forgetting your gloves is roughly equivalent to showing up to the office without trousers. Except in this scenario, the neighbors will almost certainly notice before your boss does. The Great Glove Classification System. Let's establish the scene properly. It's 7:30 in the morning. The sun is filtering politely through your kitchen curtains, and you're already standing before a row of gloves arranged on the hallway table, every pair perfectly pressed and radiating the silent disapproval of approximately 1,000 grandmothers. Somewhere in the background, the radio murmurs something about Eisenhower and the remarkable qualities of canned pineapple, but you have considerably more pressing concerns. Today is Sunday, church day. That means the white kid gloves, wrist length, featuring tiny pearl buttons that mock you with their smug, nearly impossible optimism. You slide your fingers inside, attempting to project serenity while internally conducting open warfare against a piece of elastic that would rather snap clean off than cooperate. But suppose it's Tuesday instead, grocery day. Suddenly those white gloves are entirely inappropriate and you're reaching for pale beige, something sensible but not aggressively sensible. Too heavy-duty and you'll give the impression you're planning to rob the butcher. Too delicate and you'll become the subject of produce aisle commentary for the foreseeable future. For maximum social points, you might coordinate your gloves with your handbag, your shoes, and your overall air of someone who has definitely not cried in the pantry this week. Thank you very much. Now let's address the dusting glove. Yes, it's a real category. In the 1950s, household cleaning isn't simply about achieving cleanliness. It's about accomplishing it with flair, dignity, and the faint fragrance of lemon polish. The appropriate dusting glove is cotton, ideally slightly past its prime, yet still presentable enough that you wouldn't be humiliated if the mail carrier happened to glance through the window. Pro tip: you never dust with bare hands. Barehanded dusting is a gateway behavior, a signal that you've abandoned civilization and, quite possibly, yourself. Then there are the driving gloves, not exclusively for men accelerating down the highway in a Studebaker, but for women managing the endless circuit of errands that suburban life demands. Driving gloves are buttery soft, frequently perforated for air circulation, because nothing communicates refinement quite like ventilated knuckles. They exist to shield your delicate hands from the steering wheel, which in July could comfortably serve as a cooking surface. Arriving at the post office with palms the color of a boiled lobster marks you as someone who simply doesn't make the effort. Next, the party glove, slightly shorter, possibly in a pastel shade. These gloves announce that you're fun, but within carefully monitored parameters. Wearing them before 5 in the afternoon invites raised eyebrows from anyone over 50. Wearing them after 8 in the evening sends a message, possibly that you've been reading imported magazines, which is simultaneously thrilling and faintly suspicious. The gardening glove deserves a mention. Technically, these qualify as gloves, in the same way a beach towel technically qualifies as formal attire. Nobody genuinely expects you to be seen in public wearing them, but you absolutely must own a pair, in case someone inquires about your rose garden, and you need to demonstrate that you've never made direct contact with actual soil. Finally, the emergency glove, a nondescript backup pair kept permanently in your handbag for moments when your primary gloves betray you through a visible smudge, or, the horror of horrors, going missing entirely. A truly accomplished 1950s housewife can produce a replacement glove the way a magician produces a rabbit, swiftly, smoothly, and with absolutely no visible sign of distress. Every glove is more than fabric. It's a wordless social handshake. The wrong selection and you risk neighborhood exile. The right one and you move through your day with the effortless grace of someone who knows precisely how many teaspoons to lay out for afternoon tea. And if you ever question the stakes, just remember, it isn't the house or the casserole that determines whether you belong. It's the gloves. Lose them and you've essentially extended a personal invitation to chaos. Should you arrive at the grocery store wearing mismatched gloves in a moment of frantic rushing, simply keep your chin elevated, smile with absolute serenity, and pray with everything you have that nobody mentions it at the next bridge gathering. Alternatively, start a trend and claim it's a French thing. Either way, you've survived another round of the suburban etiquette Olympics by the thinnest possible margin of your perfectly gloved fingertips. The sacred ritual of bed making, and why it could destroy you. In the 1950s, making the bed isn't simply a matter of straightening out some wrinkled fabric. It's about achieving a level of hospital corner precision so exact that a coin, or possibly a small child, could be launched into orbit upon impact. Heaven forbid the quilt shows a single crease after 8 in the morning. You'll be remaking the entire thing before your husband arrives home, just in case he's accompanied by surprise clergy or the ladies' auxiliary. The stakes, domestic dignity, and a backache that will faithfully haunt you for several decades. Let's set the stage properly. The alarm clock announces itself at a polite but insistent 6:30 in the morning. Before you've tasted a single sip of coffee, you're already positioned in the bedroom, surveying the bed the way a general surveys a battlefield before a major offensive. In the 1950s, the bed is not merely a piece of furniture. It is the altar upon which your entire reputation as a homemaker is either consecrated or permanently destroyed. The sheets must be as crisp as your public smile. The quilt must lie so perfectly smooth that it reflects morning sunlight in a way that communicates. No children or husbands have disturbed this surface since approximately 1947. First, you strip the sheets with the methodical precision of a surgeon preparing an operating table. No crumpled corners tolerated, no lingering wrinkles permitted. If your pillowcases don't match, congratulations. You've just invited neighborhood scandal and possibly opened a dimensional portal where domestic perfection experts appear uninvited to judge your linen choices. Next, you reach for the iron. In an era that existed entirely before wrinkle-resistant fabric was invented, every pillowcase and every top sheet must be pressed into complete submission. Steam rises in delicate clouds, mingling with the faint aroma of starch and quietly suppressed frustration. The iron isn't a convenience here. It's a weapon of domestic warfare, and you wield it accordingly. Hospital corners come next. For anyone fortunate enough never to have encountered these, hospital corners are sheet folds so geometrically sharp and perfectly symmetrical that a professional origami artist would weep upon seeing them. You tuck the flat sheet with a swift, almost aggressive motion, then fold it back against itself at precisely a 45-degree angle. Tug firmly, smooth completely, repeat without mercy. If you're feeling particularly ambitious on a given morning, you might even iron the top of the blanket directly on the bed itself, just to achieve that additional fraction of perfection. People in this era iron their sheets not because the activity brings them joy, but because they are genuinely uncertain what will happen to their social standing if they don't. The pillow situation. Let's not overlook the pillows. Never just one, and certainly never simply lying there like ordinary sleeping pillows that belong to ordinary sleeping humans. Each one must be thoroughly plumped, carefully stacked, and arranged according to a silent code passed down through generations, from your grandmother to her grandmother, to a mysterious Victorian ancestor who apparently had nothing more urgent to occupy her time. Decorative shams go positioned at the back. Accent pillows go arranged in front, and one peculiarly shaped ornamental pillow that serves absolutely no functional purpose whatsoever goes somewhere in the middle, existing solely to remind everyone who the real authority is in this household. The result is a bed that resembles a department store display you're not permitted to touch, rather than a place where actual human beings sleep and occasionally have nightmares about hospital corners. It is now 7:05 in the morning. You step back to appreciate your accomplishment, breathing in that rare and fleeting moment of quiet satisfaction. But don't allow yourself to relax even slightly. At some point between breakfast and lunch, one or more children will come barreling through, dragging a sticky hand or a questionable toy across every surface, undoing 3 generations of accumulated bed-making wisdom in approximately 5 seconds. The cat may launch a full-scale territorial invasion. Your husband may briefly rest his eyes in a way that somehow transforms perfectly arranged sheets into an abstract sculpture. By 3 in the afternoon, you're back at the beginning. Bed-making round 2. Because the 1950s housewife understands something fundamental, you are only as socially respected as your bed is smooth. If your husband comes home to find the bed looking like someone actually slept in it, that's an open invitation for him to ask whether you had a rough day. Worse still, it creates an opportunity for your mother-in-law to conduct a surprise linen inspection. And yes, that is a genuine thing that happens. Modern life versus 1950s bed standards. Compare this to contemporary existence. Today, making the bed is entirely optional, considered either a sign of optimistic personality or an unusual burst of productive energy that you'll probably tell someone about later. In the 1950s, skipping bedmaking triggers a chain reaction of social consequences. Picture the anxiety of missing a critical work deadline, except the deadline repeats every single morning. The supervisor is every neighbor with a window facing your driveway, and there are no extensions available under any circumstances. So you smooth and tuck and fluff and repeat, twice daily, in a ritual that exists somewhere between personal discipline, performance art, and a coded request for help that nobody around you is equipped to interpret. And when you finally allow yourself to collapse into bed at night, moving carefully so as not to disturb your own carefully constructed masterpiece, You might just drift off imagining a future world where beds make themselves automatically, and decorative pillow shams are widely understood to be an elaborate collective myth. Until that world arrives, sleep soundly, and may your corners always maintain their hospital-grade sharpness. Breakfast, a choreographed performance in 3 acts. You assumed breakfast was a casual, informal affair. Think again. In the 1950s, the first meal of the day is staged with the precision of a professional ballet production. Toast must be buttered using the correct designated knife. Bacon must be arranged in an inviting curl that communicates warmth without suggesting anything inappropriate for 7:30 in the morning. Coffee must be poured with the silent, practiced grace of someone who has trained extensively for exactly this moment. Presenting orange juice in the wrong glass is sufficient cause for the neighbors to begin whispering that you weren't raised properly. Let's set the table, literally. The 1950s breakfast isn't assembled in a desperate 4-minute window while simultaneously answering messages and wearing yesterday's clothes. It's an occasion, a daily ceremony, a meticulously executed demonstration of poise operating under significant time pressure. You rise before anyone else stirs in the house, making your way to the kitchen in your dressing gown, never a worn-out robe. What are you, some kind of unconventional free spirit? And the morning's performance commences. The table was set the previous evening, tablecloth lying as flat as a professional billiard surface, napkins folded with military crispness, plates positioned with mathematical precision, the silverware polished to such a degree that you can observe your own anxiety reflected back at you in miniature. The sequence of operations is absolutely critical. You cannot under any circumstances set the butter out before the toast is ready. This would invite domestic chaos and possibly awaken the disappointed spirit of your own mother. Toast is serious business here. White bread, gently bronzed to the correct shade, never blackened, must be transferred immediately to a waiting toast rack to prevent any moisture accumulation. Soggy toast is the unmistakable signature of someone who stopped caring. Your entire reputation, and quite possibly your domestic standing, depends on maintaining structural integrity in your bread products. The butter protocol. Next comes the buttering. Never, under any imaginable circumstances, with the dinner knife, and certainly not with a spoon, which would suggest a complete breakdown of civilized behavior. There exists a dedicated butter knife, often engraved with a family initial, sometimes inherited from a relative, and absolutely loaded with invisible social pressure. Butter must be presented in a chilled ceramic dish, never abandoned in its original wrapper on the counter like some ordinary household's margarine situation. If the butter is too cold and firm to spread smoothly, you wait patiently. You never, ever scrape aggressively at it. Scraping at the butter is the beginning of a path that ends with social isolation and an unflattering haircut. Bacon, meanwhile, is not simply deposited onto a plate. It is deliberately arranged, curled in a specific way that communicates breakfast hospitality without sending any unintended morning messages. If this sounds excessive, remember that in the 1950s you are not merely making breakfast. You are making a statement, and the statement is, I have successfully conquered both gravity and cholesterol before 8 in the morning. Eggs, if they're on the menu, arrive with their own elaborate subregulations. Scrambled eggs must achieve the correct degree of fluffiness without any runniness. The color should be yellow, but not alarmingly, suspiciously yellow. Nobody in this era trusted an egg that appeared overly enthusiastic about existing. Fried eggs require a perfectly centered yolk, achieved with the focus of a professional athlete. Poached eggs are not attempted casually, unless you're fully prepared to defend your methodology to the local women's organization. Cereal, if it must be served, perhaps the children have finally worn down your resistance, gets poured into an appropriate bowl with steady, unhurried hands, followed by cold milk dispensed from a glass pitcher. The cereal box under no circumstances goes on the table. Placing the box on the breakfast table is equivalent to announcing that you also allow pets on the furniture and consider dress codes optional. Juice arrives in the correct vessel: short and wide for orange juice, tall and elegant for tomato. Grapefruit is served in its own specialized segmented dish, accompanied by a small serrated spoon that exists for this single solitary purpose. It's entirely possible that more time is invested in polishing that particular spoon annually than is actually spent consuming grapefruit. But that observation is beside the point. Finally, coffee. This is the true ceremony at the center of everything. Coffee gets poured for others before you serve yourself. Proper etiquette always takes priority over your personal caffeine requirements. Sugar and cream are offered thoughtfully, never assumed. The pot gets rotated so the handle faces toward the guest rather than yourself. A small gesture, perhaps, but the precise distinction that separates the genuinely gracious from the merely polite. All of this gets executed with quiet, efficient urgency. The children need to be dressed and dispatched to school on schedule. Your husband must leave for the office completely convinced that he is the luckiest man currently alive. And you must face the remainder of the day knowing you successfully navigated another breakfast without fracturing the delicate piece of suburban existence. So the next time you grab something portable from the kitchen counter on your way out the door, understand what you truly are: a revolutionary, a trailblazer, a pioneer in comfortable athletic where who doesn't owe anyone a perfectly centered egg yolk. As for the toast, it will never judge you. Unlike, say, the ladies' auxiliary. The 5:15 p.m. performance, welcoming your husband home. You haven't truly experienced the full spectrum of domestic pressure until you've prepared to welcome your spouse home like a visiting minor royal. The house must be spotless, the children must be presentable, and you're expected to appear as fresh and composed as a spring morning, even if you've spent the preceding 8 hours wrestling a vacuum cleaner across 3 floors of suburban square footage. Smile at precisely the correct intensity. Straighten his tie upon arrival. And under absolutely no circumstances mention the broken washing machine, or the fact that you currently have one eyebrow remaining after an ambitious beauty experiment went sideways. Let's establish the scene properly. It's 5:15 in the afternoon, and the clock is becoming increasingly threatening. The living room has been cleared of rogue toys and unauthorized dust accumulations. The fragrance of pot roast drifts through the house with cautious optimism. The children, who were until recently sticky and operating at a suspiciously elevated energy level, are now arranged on the sofa in ascending order of height, radiating either genuine angelic calm or the deeply traumatized stillness of small people who have been very clearly instructed regarding behavioral expectations for the next 20 minutes. You, meanwhile, have transitioned out of your housework uniform, which consists of a housecoat and a 1,000-yard stare, and into a proper day dress featuring a cheerful collar. If you're feeling particularly daring, you've applied a fresh coat of lipstick in the final 3 minutes before the garage door rattles, executed with trembling optimism in front of the hallway mirror. In the social landscape of the 1950s, the moment your husband steps through the front door is less a reunion between two people who share a life and more a theatrical performance with a live audience. The etiquette literature of the period actually provides specific suggestions for conducting this greeting. Brush your hair thoroughly. Refresh your appearance. Meet him with a gentle voice and a composed smile. If you're feeling especially motivated, you might slip your feet into a pair of house heels. Yes, shoes designed exclusively for standing in the living room, while convincingly pretending you haven't been on your feet since before sunrise. This isn't simply a welcome home moment. It's a daily audition for the title of most appreciative spouse. The judges are everyone you've ever met, living and deceased. The arrival sequence. His return is heralded by the distinctive squeak of the screen door, keys producing their familiar jingle like an ominous ceremonial bell. You gather the children, quietly redirecting any last-minute confessions about shattered lamp bases or concealed amphibians, and position yourself in the entryway with your expression locked and fully operational. The door opens. You deliver your line, "Welcome home, dear," with the precise vocal quality of someone who absolutely did not, 20 minutes ago, have a significant disagreement with a malfunctioning vacuum cleaner or retrieve a small toy vehicle from the bathroom plumbing. He steps inside and you accept his coat, making pleasant conversation about his professional day. Never about yours, unless you're fully prepared to explain the nuanced economics of coupon strategy and the structural challenges of pie crust to someone who operates under the impression that laundry organizes itself. You successfully resist mentioning that the washing machine has begun producing sounds reminiscent of a large marine animal in distress, or that the household cat has developed an appetite for freshly laundered curtain panels. The performance maintains its structural integrity. His slippers are positioned and waiting. His newspaper sits neatly folded, and you're standing there embodying calm domestic competence with impressive commitment. What remains entirely unaddressed? Your own day, which included scrubbing unidentifiable substances from the kitchen linoleum, successfully negotiating a ceasefire between competing children, and discovering that the family dog has apparently developed a sophisticated taste for freshly laundered socks. But proper etiquette demands emotional self-management, so you file the existential weight of the afternoon away for later, ideally to be processed with a trusted friend and a reasonable beverage in the privacy of the back garden. The children deliver their contribution. "Welcome home, Daddy," in practiced unison. If you've successfully motivated them with the promise of a dessert reward, any deviation from the script, a complaint, a visible pout, an inquiry about overdue allowance funds, gets smoothly redirected with the diplomatic efficiency of a seasoned international negotiator. The objective is elegantly simple. Present a harmonious, loving household environment entirely free of conflict, unwashed dishes, and honest emotional transparency. Then versus now. Compare this scene to contemporary domestic life, and it's nearly impossible not to laugh. Today, the average homecoming is a blur of school backpacks hitting the floor, a dog conducting an enthusiastic perimeter inspection, someone calling out a dinner inquiry from another room, and at least one household member actively video calling while standing in the kitchen. But in the 1950s, the homecoming greeting is a sacred choreography where every movement, every smile, and every carefully selected word has been rehearsed until it operates on pure instinct. When the performance concludes and he's settled with his slippers and reading material, you finally exhale properly for the first time since approximately noon. You've survived another evening's opening act. And if your mascara has begun to migrate or your fresh and composed energy reserves are running critically low, just remember, nobody maintains the performance indefinitely. But in the 1950s, you were absolutely expected to sustain it at minimum through dessert. The coffee morning, a masterclass in polite combat. Hosting the neighborhood ladies for morning coffee sounds like a pleasant social occasion. It is not. It is a carefully choreographed minefield of unspoken rules, competitive baking, and conversational navigation, so precise it would challenge a professional diplomat. Your cups must coordinate perfectly. Your baked goods must appear homemade, or alternatively be store-bought and disguised with sufficient skill. And you must never introduce any topic that isn't simultaneously inoffensive and subtly judgmental. Remember, decaffeinated coffee signals weakness of character, and instant coffee is something you serve only to people you've already decided aren't coming back. The preparation begins at 9:45 in the morning, a full quarter hour before anyone rings the doorbell. You're already perspiring gently as you arrange the good china in careful formation. Matching floral cups with saucers so delicate they appear to be one accidental glance away from shattering. Any cup bearing a chip, crack, or suspicious color fade gets quietly relocated to the back of the cabinet, behind the seasonal mugs you're pretending don't exist. Every teaspoon receives individual polishing attention until it achieves a reflective shine. The sugar bowl is filled to the correct level. The cream pitcher is properly chilled. The coffee has been brewed to a strength your grandmother would have considered both appropriate and character-building, capable of simultaneously dissolving fatigue and minor household regrets. The baked goods require their own covert operation. If you've made the calculated decision to serve store-bought cookies, they must be transferred to a proper serving tin and gently pressed until they display convincing irregularities. Homemade by plausible deniability. There is always one woman in the gathering who will take a delicate bite, arrange her expression into something resembling polite curiosity, and ask sweetly whether this is your own personal recipe. You must respond with enthusiastic vagueness. Oh, it's just a little something I put together. If discovered with branded packaging anywhere in the vicinity, you risk social consequences ranging from mild ostracism to being volunteered to organize next month's bridge evening, which everyone understands as a form of punishment. The arrival formation. At precisely 10 o'clock, the doorbell rings. Never before, never after. The ladies enter in a coordinated formation, each one wrapped in pastel optimism and a personal cloud of floral fragrance. Handbags are carried with military discipline. Gloves are discreetly tucked away upon entry. Hats, if worn, are carefully placed on the designated rack, positioned for rapid retrieval at the first hint of conversational discomfort. Greetings are exchanged in what can only be described as a competitive understatement tournament. What a beautifully kept home. You're far too generous, it's just how we live. Is that a new area rug? I remember when I had the energy for interior updates. The conversation that follows operates according to strict subject matter regulations. Nothing of genuine significance may be introduced. Safe conversational territory includes current weather patterns, children's minor academic victories, and newly discovered casserole variations. Anything that gestures toward actual human emotion or domestic difficulty, marital complications, existential uncertainty, the persistent urge to deposit all the laundry in the yard and relocate to somewhere warm and uncomplicated, must be carefully concealed behind observations about rising grocery costs or the genuinely troubling condition of the hydrangeas next door. Should you accidentally allow something authentic to surface, the resulting silence will be sharp enough to cut through kitchen linoleum. Coffee gets poured with the ceremonial gravity of a religious observance. The host always serves others before herself, presenting sugar, cream, or if you're feeling particularly adventurous, one of those modern artificial sweeteners that everyone privately suspects may cause either serious health complications or communist sympathies. Decaffeinated coffee is regarded with polite but unmistakable suspicion. Instant coffee is reserved exclusively for people you consider adversaries. As the morning progresses, compliments and quiet criticism circulate together like cream dissolving in the cup. Someone will note how charming your curtains appear despite the obvious sun damage. Another will mention how well your youngest child is developing, given everything. There are gentle competitive observations about flour brand loyalty and coordinated sighing about the current price of beef. Everyone agrees that managing a household is exhausting work, though nobody suggests this might be a structural problem worth examining. The grand exit. By 11:30, the departure sequence initiates. Gloves are retrieved from wherever they were discreetly stored. Handbags are reclaimed. Promises to repeat this gathering very soon are issued with the formal gravity of international treaty negotiations. As the final car disappears around the corner, you exhale with genuine relief, survey the crumb situation, and entertain brief fantasies about relocating somewhere that doesn't operate on a coffee morning schedule. You've navigated the unwritten regulations for another week. Just ensure that store-bought cookie packaging never makes an appearance in your visible trash receptacle. Otherwise, you become the cautionary tale being discussed over someone else's china next Tuesday morning. The Tupperware Party, a diplomatic mission in pastel. Tupperware isn't simply a category of food storage containers. It's a loyalty test disguised as a social gathering. Purchase too little and you've declared yourself an enemy of progress, and by direct extension, an enemy of the woman hosting the party. Purchase too much and your husband will begin asking uncomfortable questions about whether you're planning to house a family of medium-sized woodland creatures in the kitchen. The only thing more structurally complicated than the airtight seal on a Tupperware container is determining how to exit the party without committing what the neighborhood will quietly classify as a serious social felony. Let's establish the scene. It's 7 in the evening and you've arrived at Janet's house carrying a nervous smile and a vague sense of approaching doom, specifically the dawning realization that before this evening concludes, you will have purchased enough plastic storage capacity to outlast several major civilizations. The living room has been completely transformed into a pastel-colored operational headquarters. The coffee table strains under the weight of Tupperware displayed in every shade the mid-century color palette could produce: avocado green, blush pink, and a particular shade of orange that appears nowhere in the natural world. Your hostess radiates the specific energy of someone who has fully committed to a new belief system and also promised her sales supervisor she'd move 50 complete sets before next Thursday. She has rehearsed every product feature and customer benefit, and the next 60 minutes will feel less like a retail presentation and more like a revival meeting centered entirely on airtight food preservation. The demonstration sequence. The party unfolds according to a choreography known only to veterans of previous gatherings. First, you're offered a beverage, a proper cocktail or a cheerful sherbet punch, served naturally in a Tupperware cup. You accept it with appropriate grace, understanding that the entire event is structured as an extended evaluation. Will you remark appreciatively on the cup's impressive durability and forward-thinking design? Or will you make the catastrophic error of mentioning that it carries a faint aromatic memory of last week's chili? Next arrives the demonstration portion, which is less a product presentation and more a carefully staged piece of performance theater. Your hostess activates the burp seal lid with a satisfying atmospheric pop, a sound engineered to represent both freshness and human progress simultaneously. There follows a ceremonial demonstration involving fresh lettuce, a solemn ritual designed to prove that, with the correct plastic storage solution, even a simple salad can survive the anxieties of the atomic age. Someone in the gathering produces an audible gasp as a container is deliberately dropped onto the carpet, emerging completely undamaged. The lettuce inside remains as crisp and composed as corporate ambition on a Monday morning. Then come the testimonials. Each woman takes her designated turn celebrating the Tupperware she already owns at home. I kept a single pineapple slice fresh for 3 consecutive weeks. My casserole never dries out anymore. The stacking configuration is genuinely beautiful. My husband actually noticed and said something. The enthusiasm generated is only marginally less intense than what you'd encounter at a significant royal ceremony. The ordering dilemma. Now arrives the genuine challenge of the evening, the ordering process. Purchase too conservatively, and you risk being quietly cataloged as someone who rejects modern convenience, and by uncomfortable implication, rejects friendship with Janet herself. Purchase too enthusiastically, and you'll spend the remainder of the month constructing explanations for your spouse regarding why your household now requires a container designed exclusively for storing hard-boiled eggs. The social etiquette governing this transaction is as precisely calibrated as international arms negotiations. You must select enough products to convincingly demonstrate personal support, but not so many that your kitchen transforms into a storage facility that future historians might find worth documenting. It's a calculation requiring genuine strategic thought while simultaneously appearing entirely spontaneous and enthusiasm-driven. And the games. Every Tupperware gathering incorporates organized games, container identification challenges, lid-stacking competitions, mystery product guessing rounds. These activities function simultaneously as social lubricant and subtle reinforcement of the central message. The only meaningful barrier between you and complete Tupperware-enabled domestic happiness is insufficient imagination, and possibly your current budget situation. Conversation throughout the evening maintains a careful balance between competitive homemaking observations and strategically friendly commentary. Oh, you're still relying on wax paper. Well, I suppose that works perfectly well if you enjoy stale baked goods. Or, we've replaced every glass jar in the house. Haven't experienced a single breakage since. You nod and smile with practiced warmth, internally grateful that nobody has requested a tour of your own pantry, where a single orphaned lid has been missing since the Eisenhower administration began. The escape protocol. As the evening approaches its conclusion, you're presented with carefully packed leftovers stored in, naturally, Tupperware containers. You accept them without hesitation, understanding that declining would register as the ultimate personal insult to your hostess. Then comes the final and most technically demanding challenge of the evening: leaving. You cannot simply collect your belongings and exit. That's not how this works. You must linger at a socially appropriate duration, deliver genuine-sounding compliments about the hosting, and sign the order form with a signature that communicates, "I am simultaneously modern, financially responsible, and deeply enthusiastic. Please now allow me to return to my family." So you survive, departing with plastic containers in hand, already mentally organizing your own gathering where you can redistribute the 6-piece citrus storage set you acquired in a moment of purchasing panic. In the social ecosystem of 1950s suburbia, Tupperware parties aren't merely commercial events. They're initiation ceremonies, secret membership handshakes, and the airtight seal on neighborhood belonging itself. The Hemline Crisis, when fashion becomes warfare. There is no anxiety quite as specific and paralyzing as the moment you realize your skirt hem has drifted a full half-inch beyond the accepted measurement. Do you accept the social risk and continue with your day, or do you make an immediate run for your emergency sewing kit? Local housewives in this era can measure hemline deviation to the millimeter using only their eyes. In the 1950s, a wandering hemline isn't simply a minor fashion inconsistency. It's a standing invitation for unsolicited wardrobe consultation from every woman over 40 within a 5-block radius. Your day begins innocently enough. You slip into a skirt that passed visual inspection just last week. Then disaster arrives in the form of the hallway mirror, which reveals that overnight, through some mysterious textile conspiracy, the hemline has shifted. What was previously appropriate is now either dangerously conservative or scandalously modern, depending on which direction it traveled. Your heart performs a small, anxious maneuver. Do you risk public exposure? Or do you execute an emergency alteration before the school bus appears around the corner? In 1950s suburbia, skirt length is less a matter of personal aesthetic preference and more the subject of a continuous neighborhood referendum. There is no formal regulatory body governing these standards, but there is Mrs. Caldwell across the street, who possesses the remarkable ability to identify hemline irregularities at 50 paces while simultaneously watering her front garden. The foundational rule: the skirt must terminate precisely below the knee, not measurably above, not noticeably below. If it runs long, you risk appearing as though you're concealing emergency food supplies from a previous decade. Too short, and you'll be managing whispered commentary about your moral character until the Labor Day holiday provides a natural conversational reset. The silent fashion tournament. The anxiety extends well beyond your own wardrobe choices. At every PTA gathering, every grocery run, every church step encounter, you're conducting continuous hemline surveillance of every other woman present, quietly calculating, mentally measuring, hopping your own selection lands within the acceptable range. Everyone is simultaneously judge and competitor in this unspoken, ongoing fashion evaluation. You'll recall last month's neighborhood incident. Helen's daughter appeared at the local soda fountain wearing a skirt positioned 2 full inches above the knee. For the following week, the only topic generating comparable discussion was the rising cost of beef. The worst complication: hemlines are fundamentally unreliable. You can spend an entire morning conducting mirror checks, but the moment you kneel to retrieve something from a lower shelf, your skirt relocates in ways that could send sensitive neighbors toward their fainting furniture. Or worse, the sitting test. You might achieve perfect standing hemline measurements, but the moment you sit in any chair, the fabric contracts to reveal dimensions of your lower anatomy that surprised even you. The only reliable defensive strategy is mastering the art of perching on the absolute forward edge of every available seating surface. Spine perfectly vertical, ankles crossed with precision, prepared to spring upright if anyone approaches carrying measuring implements. Fashion publications occasionally offer hemline guidance. Raise your hem slightly for a more youthful appearance, they suggest cheerfully, never acknowledging the genuine danger this advice represents. Specifically, the well-meaning neighbor with her own sewing machine who has decided your wardrobe requires her professional attention. She may arrive bearing a casserole and a carefully phrased suggestion that she could just take it in slightly, dear, for the current season. Decline her offer, and you've initiated a neighborhood Cold War. Accept it, and your hemline will be a measurable fraction shorter following every subsequent visit. The most strategically reliable approach remains simple. Maintain a needle and thread in your handbag at all times, and keep continuous awareness of the local fashion climate. All of this sustained effort simply for the privilege of walking to the mailbox without generating neighborhood commentary. Modern existence offers freedoms entirely unimaginable in the era of the militant hemline. Today you could wear pajama pants to a grocery store and receive a genuine compliment. But in the 1950s, a skirt was a public statement, and its hem was the precise boundary between social acceptance and quiet exile. So whenever you find yourself puzzled by your grandmother's strong opinions about appropriate clothing lengths, remember, she fought in the hemline wars, armed with nothing but a thimble, a measuring tape, and remarkable reserves of social endurance. And she survived most days with both her dignity and her seams completely intact. Gelatin salad, the dish that defied all logic. No 1950s dinner party achieves completion without at least one dish that encases 3 fundamentally incompatible food categories inside lime-flavored gelatin. Proper etiquette requires you to perform enthusiastic appreciation, or at minimum avoid producing any facial expression that will follow your reputation for the next decade. Essential advanced strategy. Always establish what's suspended inside the salad before your fork commits to anything. Let's paint the full picture. The doorbell rings at precisely 6 o'clock, signaling the beginning of an evening where both casseroles and conversational skills will be evaluated for fundamental soundness. The table presents a complete spectrum of mid-century optimism: avocado green serving plates, pink linen napkins, and positioned at absolute center stage, the shimmering, gently wobbling centerpiece, the gelatin salad. It catches the chandelier light with a promise that exists somewhere between genuine hospitality and low-grade threat. Somewhere within its translucent depths, a ring of canned pineapple, shredded carrot, and miniature marshmallows float in an uneasy arrangement. If you maintain eye contact long enough, you may begin to detect fragments of tuna suspended inside like prehistoric specimens preserved in amber. Presenting gelatin at a dinner gathering isn't merely an act of hospitality. It's a rite of passage, an edible stress examination for everyone present, host and guest alike. Survival strategies for the gelatin experience. As the hostess, your objective is clear. Present a dish of such visual impressiveness, or at minimum such structural integrity, that nobody thinks to question its contents until it's well past the point of polite refusal. The presentation rules are absolute. Citrus slices must be distributed at perfect intervals. Nothing may sink. Nothing may float above the surface, except possibly your dignity, which is already making contingency plans. Your guests, meanwhile, engage in the time-honored ritual of pretending not to experience any alarm whatsoever. You beam with hostess pride while describing the creation. It's mother's signature recipe: lime gelatin, cottage cheese, celery, and just a small addition of seafood for supplemental protein. Guests produce approving nods while quietly identifying their nearest exit routes. One courageous soul spears a portion with their fork, examining it with the focused attention of someone deciding whether it might make an independent break for the window. Another guest, cornered by circumstance, simply maintains a pleasant expression and engages in animated conversation about local school board policies, determined to consume whatever the fork encounters without any visible emotional response. If you're attending rather than hosting, your strategic options are limited but functional. Accept the smallest geometrically defensible serving. Reposition it toward the outer edge of your plate. Discuss local educational developments with considerable enthusiasm until the rest of the table has finished their portions. If directly confronted by your hostess, compliment the color with genuine-sounding appreciation. Such a remarkable shade of green. Or admire the structural achievement. How does it maintain that shape so consistently? Under no circumstances inquire about the flavor profile. Some questions cannot be unasked. The most creative dinner guests have developed advanced escape techniques: the accidental carpet deposit, the strategic napkin concealment. Children remain the most authentically honest critics, frequently recoiling from the first spoonful with zero diplomatic filtering. The rest of the adult table must persevere, chewing with commitment through every gelatinous forkful, privately wondering who first examined a package of lime gelatin and concluded it needed tuna. Modern equivalent. Imagine if every family gathering featured a dish combining processed meat products, vanilla pudding and kale, and social convention required everyone to engage with it enthusiastically. That's the 1950s gelatin salad experience. No questions entertained. No refusals accepted. Just the collective unspoken agreement that this too represents civilization advancing confidently forward. Of course, occasionally the gelatin is genuinely enjoyable. Classic strawberry with mixed fruit or orange with mandarin segments. But the uncertainty lurking beneath that quivering surface is always present. The most adventurous hostesses of the period took visible pride in culinary innovation. "I'm calling it tuna aspic à la mode," they'd announce, while guests quietly updated their personal documents. If you successfully navigate the entire serving, you've secured your position in polite society for another complete season. If not, you'll feature in cautionary discussions at the next bridge gathering. So when you encounter a suspiciously vibrant molded dish at any future social occasion, channel your internal 1950s housewife. Keep your expression composed, your compliments appropriately vague, and your napkin positioned for maximum strategic utility. Because in the world of gelatin-based social navigation, survival isn't about enjoying the dish. It's about performing enjoyment convincingly enough to attend next month's dinner and encounter whatever culinary adventure awaits inside the mold. Food safety, a high-wire act over a bacterial abyss. Want to make a genuinely positive impression on your dinner guests? Start with the foundational goal of not sending anyone home with a foodborne illness. From deviled eggs left contemplating their existence on the sideboard all afternoon, to the genuinely mysterious casserole your great-aunt deposited on the back porch, every meal represents a delicate navigation between generous hospitality and accidental biological experimentation. If everyone departs upright and symptom-free, you've achieved the evening's primary objective. Let's arrange the dinner table properly. It's Friday evening, and the air carries equal measures of anticipation and roasting chicken. You've dedicated the entire day to cleaning, baking, and conducting quiet negotiations with your oven, which has been exhibiting temperamental behavior since approximately March. The table is fully arranged. The centerpiece is catching the light beautifully, and the buffet surface strains under the combined weight of every recipe you could locate across 3 issues of a popular homemaking publication. On the surface, everything presents as perfect, a domestic scene worthy of a magazine photography session. Beneath that surface, however, lies an entirely different reality, a carefully hidden minefield of microorganisms patiently inhabiting the mayonnaise, the slow-roasted meats, and every refrigerated item that has been sitting at room temperature for just slightly longer than anyone is prepared to formally acknowledge. Food safety in the 1950s operates as a sustained high-wire performance. Guidelines exist, certainly, but they're written in the optimistic language of hopeful suggestion rather than scientific certainty. Serve cold dishes well chilled. The guidance instructs. But what precisely does well chilled translate to in a household where the icebox predates the current marriage by several years? You understand that deviled eggs require cold storage, but after 3 hours positioned on the sideboard, they've developed a surface sheen that can only be described as scientifically concerning. You execute what any reasonable hostess would do in this situation. Conduct a quick olfactory assessment and proceed with cautious optimism. If you're genuinely worried, you relocate them strategically toward the end of the buffet table nearest the guest you've been feuding with since the spring bake sale. The casserole situation. Now let's examine the casserole. The casserole occupies a unique position in the 1950s kitchen as simultaneously the crown jewel of domestic cooking and the leading suspect in most culinary investigations. Assembled in the early afternoon, positioned on the windowsill for an extended cooling period, then quietly forgot until 30 minutes before guests arrive. It's a dish that navigates the razor-thin boundary between beloved family tradition and a health department conversation. The topping should achieve the correct golden color. The interior should be visibly bubbling at the edges. But if the center produces an independent wobbling motion, and this is not the gelatin dish, that's the moment to begin seriously reassessing your timeline. Potato salad deserves its own extended analysis. This apparently innocent side dish is a fixture at every social gathering, and simultaneously, the reason an entire generation developed complicated feelings about outdoor eating. In the 1950s, potato salad is produced with generous quantities of mayonnaise and then positioned in direct sunlight, surrounded by optimistic flies and relatives who have learned to eat quickly and ask questions later. The practical guideline: if it's still genuinely cold, consume it without hesitation. If it's achieved room temperature, begin developing plausible explanations involving your sensitive digestive system. Then there's the mystery protein. Every gathering features one: a loaf, a roast, or a ring-shaped creation that resists definitive identification. It's glazed to a reflective shine. It's been sitting out long enough to generate genuine philosophical questions. Your responsibility as hostess is to present it with absolute confidence and a carefully maintained position of plausible deniability. Oh, that's a generations-old family recipe. If a guest pursues further ingredient inquiry, redirect the conversation toward recent weather developments or the latest innovations in plastic food storage. Both topics reliably absorb conversational energy for extended periods. The arsenal of domestic defense. Your kitchen defensive capabilities consist of exactly 2 primary weapons against culinary disaster: plastic food wrap and the icebox. The wrap, recently invented and deployed with considerable domestic pride, gets stretched across every bowl and serving tray in the household, its stated purpose being the prevention of both bacterial transfer and neighborhood gossip. The icebox hums with heroic determination, fighting valiantly to maintain your ambrosia salad at a temperature that technically qualifies as cold. You understand it's really just managing the rate of inevitable decline, but you appreciate the effort. The conclusion of the meal represents the evening's most suspenseful passage. You observe your guests with the focused attention of a researcher conducting a field study. Does anyone appear unusually pale? Is Mr. Jenkins perspiring more than the ambient temperature would explain? Or is that simply the cumulative effect of the scalloped potato dish? Nobody wants to be personally responsible for the incident that gets referenced in neighborhood conversation for the following 3 years. You distribute leftover containers at the evening's end with a quiet internal prayer and a carefully worded parting suggestion. Just make sure that gets into the refrigerator as soon as you're home. It's simultaneously genuine hospitality and the most subtle liability management available to a 1950s housewife. So yes, you've succeeded when your guests depart standing upright, wearing genuine smiles, and displaying none of the early symptoms associated with an unfortunate evening. In the 1950s, that specific combination of outcomes represents hospitality operating at its absolute finest. As you clear the table, you can rest in the satisfaction of having hosted not merely a dinner, but a successful, if mildly adventurous, examination of friendship and digestive resilience. Children as tiny diplomats, the most demanding job in suburbia. In the 1950s, the behavioral standards applied to children are considerably more complex than the federal tax code. They must never interrupt adult conversation. They must never speak unless directly addressed by a grown-up. And they must under absolutely no circumstances express a genuine personal opinion in mixed company. The responsibility for producing children who meet these standards rests entirely with you. And any observable failure in their performance is understood by the neighborhood as evidence of something deeply concerning about your household's fundamental values. Let's observe the scene. It's a Sunday afternoon. The house echoes with the measured sounds of polite adult conversation, and you're internally running continuous probability calculations about whether your children will maintain their assigned roles in this domestic theater production for the duration of the visit. Each child has been scrubbed to a shine that borders on medically unnecessary. Hair has been flattened with water and determination. Collars have been straightened to within a millimeter of their structural limits. They sit with hands folded in their laps, wearing expressions that can be most accurately described as mildly terrified with undertones of digestive discomfort. In the 1950s, a child's primary social function is to be visible but not audible, unless a guest directs a specific question toward them, in which case the response must be delivered with clarity, genuine cheerfulness, and a degree of personal humility, suggesting that their ambitions extend no further than completing household chores and attending Sunday school with enthusiasm. The unwritten child behavior regulations. The behavioral manual governing children in this era would fill an encyclopedia set. Running inside the house, prohibited. Climbing any household furniture, absolutely prohibited. Producing animal vocalizations in the presence of clergy, prohibited with significant social consequences. Questions must be answered in complete grammatically correct sentences. Napkins must be deployed in laps before any food contact occurs. Chewing must be conducted with the quiet restraint appropriate for a formal state luncheon. Should a child produce anything resembling an authentic personal opinion, I find meatloaf genuinely unpleasant, or why does Mr. Johnson consistently smell like mothballs? The room temperature drops several degrees immediately. Every adult present redirects their attention to you. And you, the mother, find yourself in the position of apologizing as though your child has just publicly questioned fundamental economic principles on a live broadcast. Disciplinary communication operates through an elaborate silent system, a carefully calibrated series of visual signals and eyebrow configurations, each one precisely tuned to communicate specific messages ranging from "please stop making contact with your sister's arm" to if that milk glass tips over you will be spending the night in the garden. The promise of dessert functions as a behavioral incentive of considerable power. The nuclear option, reserving all consequences for your husband's arrival home, carries a deterrent effect that can sustain acceptable behavior through remarkably extended periods. And yet children aren't passive participants in this domestic theater. They're extraordinarily observant. At the dinner table, they absorb every regulation, every carefully managed silence, every strategic subject change executed by the adults around them. These observations later resurface with startling accuracy during neighborhood playdates, when your 5-year-old delivers a detailed critique of the Johnson family's interior decorating choices, or casually informs your neighbor that Mommy says your gelatin salad is very creative. The stakes operate at a significant level. A single behavioral incident, a public emotional outburst, an audible digestive sound during bridge club, a moment of unfiltered honesty that escapes containment, and you become the week's primary neighborhood discussion topic. Did you hear what happened at Margaret's? Her son requested ketchup with the pot roast. Ketchup with pot roast. You'll receive gentle but persistent retellings of stories about previous generations, when children understood their social positioning and mothers maintained appropriate household standards. What they actually learn. Modern perspective. Imagine attempting to raise a collection of small, fundamentally unpredictable diplomatic representatives who must maintain flawless social performance at all times, despite their natural operating state being one of enthusiastic chaos. And consider that every observable parenting misstep gets interpreted not as a normal developmental challenge, but as an early warning signal that your entire household is trending toward moral decline, unconventional music preferences, and unregulated snack scheduling. Yet beneath all the pressure, something genuinely worthwhile does develop. The children eventually internalize the rules. They develop real capacity for casual social conversation. They acquire an almost instinctive ability to read a room's emotional temperature. They become genuinely skilled at napkin management, teacup navigation, and producing vague complimentary remarks about rhubarb-based desserts. They may stage small strategic rebellions, consuming art supply paste during school hours or establishing a hiding position under the guest bed during extended relative visits. But they emerge, mostly, as socially aware individuals with anxiety levels and conversational skills that match their parents' most optimistic projections. So when you encounter vintage photographs featuring rows of perfectly composed, immaculately dressed children arranged with the precision of decorative objects, remember the unspoken reality operating just beneath the surface. They are watching everything. They are cataloging everything. And somewhere in their small, determined minds, they are quietly developing the plan for their next great etiquette escape. Answering the telephone, a performance in real time. Answering the household telephone isn't simply an act of communication. It's a live performance with no rehearsal time and a potentially critical audience. Your greeting must arrive crisp and fully formed. Your vocal tone must communicate cheerful competence. And under no circumstances may you acknowledge that you were in the bath, or heaven forbid, in the revolutionary act of sitting down when the call arrived. And should the caller have reached a wrong number, your response must convey the gracious forgiveness appropriate for someone who has personally inconvenienced you on a significant scale. Let's position ourselves in the hallway, where the family telephone occupies its dedicated small table, positioned next to a notepad reserved exclusively for important messages and stress-related doodling. The telephone itself is a rotary instrument of considerable physical presence, heavy and reassuringly solid, available in a color best described as harvest wheat or institutional beige. The ring that cuts through the household carries no adjustable volume, no silent mode option, no technological mercy of any description. Someone somewhere has decided that communication with your household is urgently necessary, and the entire structure of domestic life must immediately reorganize around that decision. You don't consider delaying your response. Sprinting toward the telephone is not just acceptable, it's expected behavior. Allowing it to ring beyond 3 times puts the entire household on edge with escalating anxiety. What if it's an emergency situation? What if it's Mrs. Flounders with critical information about church organizational matters? What if it's the milk delivery person calling to report a logistical complication in your driveway? Each unanswered ring raises the collective household stakes. By the time you actually lift the receiver, your heart rate has elevated considerably, and you've temporarily forgotten your own name. But none of this internal experience may surface in any detectable way. The greeting protocol. Lifting the receiver, you take one measured, calming breath and deliver your greeting. Never a casual hello. Never. Something complete and composed. Good morning, Thompson residence, Margaret speaking. Delivered with the crisp confidence of someone who has been positioned beside this telephone for hours, engaged in nothing more demanding than alphabetizing recipe card collections. If you're breathless from crossing 3 rooms at speed, you must disguise it completely. If you were in the middle of bread dough preparation or deep in a vacuuming session, that information must never reach the caller. The carefully maintained illusion is everything. You are always composed. You are always prepared. You have never in your life been caught doing anything as undignified as rushing. Under absolutely no circumstances should the person calling you suspect that 30 seconds ago you were horizontal on the sofa consuming crackers and reading a magazine. The reputation of your entire household rests on this single maintained illusion. The genuinely worst-case scenario, a wrong number. In the 1950s, this qualifies as a minor social event requiring its own protocol. The caller stumbles through their apology. "Oh, I'm terribly sorry, I must have dialed incorrectly." And suddenly both parties are engaged in an elaborate courtesy duet. "Oh, absolutely no inconvenience whatsoever," you respond, as though forgiving them for a minor international incident. "I do hope you reach whoever you're looking for." If you're genuinely committed to the performance, you might offer navigational assistance. "Are you certain you dialed the correct exchange?" All of this delivered in your most accommodating and sunlit vocal register. You replace the receiver and exhale carefully, hoping you haven't inadvertently communicated anything less than complete warmth. A reputation for telephone curtness spreads through the social network with remarkable efficiency. Bridge club invitations develop a mysterious tendency to get lost in the mail. The telephone is never a private experience within the household. Every call is a shared domestic event. Children get quietly redirected to other rooms. Radio programs get turned down respectfully. The dog gets relocated to the garden. Your half of the conversation performs for whatever audience is assembled, your spouse, your children, possibly the neighbor who has developed an uncanny awareness of your incoming call schedule and finds reasons to be near a window at relevant times. If the call is intended for another household member, the relay process carries its own etiquette requirements. "One moment, please," delivered with unhurried grace, followed by locating the intended recipient without creating the impression of chaos. If the connection gets lost during this transfer, or if you accidentally terminate the call entirely, you're dealing with a household scandal of sufficient weight to merit Thanksgiving table discussion. Compare this to contemporary telephone culture, where answering an unrecognized number is considered either mildly suspicious or frankly heroic. In the 1950s, every call was simultaneously a responsibility and a ritual, and answering with anything less than complete cheerful competence, you'd essentially need to relocate. So the next time you encounter a rotary telephone displayed in an antique establishment, pause for a genuine moment of reflection. Remember an era when every incoming call represented a test of social character. Every wrong number offered an opportunity to demonstrate grace under mild pressure. and every greeting was a small, perfectly executed act on the grand stage of suburban performance. The unannounced visitor, a 7-second emergency. There is no particular category of panic quite as specific and immediately physical as spotting a neighbor's vehicle slowing to a stop outside your driveway without any prior warning or appointment. Are your shoes currently on your feet? Is your house operating at a publicly presentable standard? Are you wearing actual clothing, or something that technically qualifies as clothing only by the most generous possible interpretation? If the answers to any of these questions are unfavorable, you have approximately 7 seconds to achieve a state of complete presentable composure, or face consequences that will be discussed at coffee mornings for the foreseeable future. It's 2:15 in the afternoon. The house has finally achieved the quiet that only arrives during that narrow window between morning chaos and afternoon chaos. You're deep in the meditative state that accompanies laundry sorting, contemplating the genuinely philosophical question of whether socks actually require pairing, or whether that's a social construct you could quietly abandon. Alternatively, you're halfway through a well-deserved cup of coffee and 3 pages into the latest Reader's Digest. Then it happens. Through the window you catch it, the distinctive glint of chrome, the familiar pastel paint scheme, the unmistakable deceleration pattern of Mrs. Allen's station wagon. She's not simply passing by. She's coming to a complete stop directly in front of your property. She's not alone. Her daughter occupies the back seat alongside a mysterious pie-shaped object that could represent either generous hospitality or a tactical assessment of your dessert plate situation. The blood evacuates your face with impressive efficiency. It's too late for evasive action. You've been spotted through the windshield. Eye contact has been established. The social contract has been activated. Time undergoes a subjective transformation. By your internal calculation, you now have fewer than 10 seconds before she's standing at your front door. You enter a state of barely organized emergency response. The 7-second transformation. Shoes. Where are your shoes? Why are they never in any location that could be described as logical? You briefly consider answering the door in your current footwear situation, then immediately recall last week's neighborhood discussion about Mrs. Patterson's progressive lifestyle choices, which apparently began with her answering the door in house slippers and escalated from there in ways nobody is entirely comfortable describing. The living room requires immediate attention. You conduct a rapid perimeter sweep, collecting rogue magazines and one sock of genuinely uncertain origin from the sofa cushions. The coffee table hosts a landscape of children's coloring implements and last evening's popcorn remnants. You clear everything into the nearest drawer with a single sweeping motion, applying brief pressure to ensure it closes completely, and making a private note that this drawer will require careful future management. The vacuum cleaner stands in the corner of the room, positioned there from your morning cleaning session. You make the strategic decision to activate it. The sound communicates something important. Order is always maintained in this household. Cleaning is a continuous background activity here, not something hastily initiated 30 seconds before company arrives. You allow the machine to run for approximately 90 seconds of impression management. Then redirect your attention to your personal presentation. Are you still wearing your housework uniform? Specifically, yesterday's housecoat featuring what appears to be jam involvement in the general shoulder region. This requires immediate resolution. You locate a clean apron and execute a rapid lipstick application in the hallway mirror. Nothing communicates domestic competence and personal standards quite like lipstick applied in genuine haste, while a station wagon idles in your driveway. You pass a single hand through your hair, smooth your skirt to its correct position, and assemble your expression into something approximating serene anticipation. The doorbell rings. You take one complete measured breath. You arrange your face into its best expression of delighted surprise. You open the door. The performance commences. "Oh, what a wonderful surprise," you declare, projecting warmth and complete composure. Hopping your vocal delivery doesn't carry any detectable trace of the emergency operations that concluded 11 seconds ago. Mrs. Allen steps across the threshold, her eyes conducting a rapid environmental survey with the practiced efficiency of someone who does this professionally. You direct your silent prayers toward the sock you believe is concealed beneath the sofa edge, and the faint aromatic memory of this morning's toast situation that may or may not still be detectable. Her daughter stands in the doorway maintaining possession of the mystery pie, which you're now interpreting as either a genuine gesture of neighborly warmth or an elaborate test of your ability to produce clean serving utensils on extremely short notice. The conversation that follows occupies a pleasant blur. You offer coffee, despite the fact that the pot is empty and the available mugs are either chipped or, the greater catastrophe, mismatched. You conduct a silent inventory of the sugar bowl's current location and experience a moment of genuine concern about the state of the guest bathroom, which last received your attention sometime during the previous week. Mrs. Allen discusses the upcoming school fundraiser with considerable enthusiasm. You respond with matching enthusiasm while simultaneously calculating how long it will take her to notice that the upper surface of the television set hasn't been dusted since Tuesday. Every passing minute feels like a quiet evaluation of your home's standard of maintenance, your children's current location and behavioral state, and your fundamental ability to maintain the appearance of having everything consistently under complete control. Then, the moment every hostess in 1950s suburbia fears above almost all others: "May I use your bathroom?" You smile without any visible hesitation. "Of course," you say with the easy confidence of someone whose guest bathroom is always in impeccable condition. You direct her down the hallway and immediately begin the internal damage assessment. Towels. Are the company towels properly positioned? Soap dish. Aligned correctly. Counter surface. Presentable. You'll know the results of this inspection from the precise quality of her expression when she returns. The aftermath. Finally, with an extended exchange of warm farewells and genuine promises to repeat this visit very soon, the visit concludes. You close the front door with careful quietness and allow yourself to make contact with it briefly, eyes closed. Breathing returning to normal parameters. You survived. The unannounced visitor has been received, entertained, and successfully dispatched without any visible evidence of the domestic reality that existed 9 minutes before her arrival. The living room has been slightly reorganized by the visit. The children materialized from wherever they were concealing themselves, conducted brief polite interactions, and retreated again. The mystery pie is now on your kitchen counter. In the confidential records of suburban domestic performance, navigating an unannounced visitor without any detectable sign of preparation qualifies as a significant achievement. It requires the rapid thinking of an emergency responder, the improvisational skill of a theater performer, and the maintenance of an expression suggesting that your household always looks exactly like this, at every hour of every day, without exception. The clothesline, your public profile picture. Hanging laundry outside to dry is a precise science with significant social implications. Bed sheets must billow with aesthetic intention. Undergarments must be strategically concealed behind towel barriers. Socks must be paired with military-grade consistency. The housewife whose unmentionables are visible to the mail carrier from the public street has committed a transgression that will require considerable time and effort to recover from socially. Picture the scene. It's a breezy Wednesday morning and the suburban backyards have come alive with the competitive symphony of laundry day. Over the fence comes the rhythmic percussion of wooden clothespins, the gentle applause of cotton moving in the breeze, and the background soundtrack of neighbors exchanging information under the classification of casual conversation. In the world of 1950s suburbia, the backyard clothesline isn't merely a functional drying apparatus. It's your most visible public display, the equivalent of a carefully curated social profile that every neighbor with a window facing your direction evaluates weekly. Before a single item gets lifted toward the line, you must conduct an audience assessment. Mrs. Parker is conducting Rose maintenance at the fence line, monitoring your technique with the peripheral attention she reserves for this specific weekly performance. The mail carrier, operating on a schedule more reliable than sunrise, is completing his route with the capacity for silent observation intact. The children from the adjacent property are positioned and waiting, hopping for a strong wind event that might redistribute someone's more personal garments into a tree. The stakes are established, and the regulations are unwritten but absolute. The clothesline hierarchy. Sheets occupy the premier position. Center stage, maximum visibility, perfectly straight alignment without exception. The art of the properly displayed bed sheet is genuine and practiced. If your linens move gracefully in the breeze, the neighborhood understands you to be a person of taste and organized domestic habits. If they droop or develop uneven tension, the whisper network activates. Was starch omitted from the process? Is she losing her previous standard? There is genuinely no faster path to a quiet morning confidence crisis than a visibly limp sheet at 10 in the morning. Undergarments occupy a category requiring maximum strategic management. The foundational principle is concealment through layering. Under absolutely no circumstances may these items hang in exposed positions. Brassieres must be positioned behind pillowcase barriers or camouflaged within a double row of bath towels. Should any item of intimate apparel become visible to the mail carrier during his route, expect a period of politely maintained conversational distance, and possibly an organized prayer response from the church auxiliary by the end of the week. The safest operational approach. Complete this particular category of hanging in the early morning hours before the neighborhood has fully activated its observation network. Socks present their own battlefield. In the 1950s, socks are not simply draped across the line wherever space permits. They are hung in matched pairs, toe ends oriented consistently, heel ends facing the opposite consistent direction, spacing maintained at equal intervals, heights matching precisely across the line. Any deviation from this standard suggests either a dangerous disregard for domestic order or, more concerning, a disregard for laundry as a practice worthy of serious attention. A single unmatched sock fluttering independently on the line is a visible symbol of household chaos, the kind that produces sighing from Mrs. Parker and prompts a telephone call to your mother-in-law before the afternoon is over. The weather factor and social currency. Towels and handkerchiefs function as the utility players of the clothesline display. Deploy them strategically to fill visual gaps, provide coverage for the undergarment category, and create an overall impression of abundant, well-managed household textile production. Your line should suggest a healthy, active family with appropriate laundry volume, without crossing into the territory of appearing to be running a commercial operation. The weather dimension transforms laundry day into an ongoing meteorological anxious monitoring situation. You've developed the ability to interpret cloud formations with the focused intensity of a professional weather forecaster during an emergency weather event. Rain arriving at the wrong moment sends you sprinting barefoot across the yard, executing an emergency retrieval operation on whatever can be saved, while simultaneously hoping that no neighbor currently has an unobstructed view of this particular performance. The entire sequence repeats on a weekly schedule at minimum. A flawlessly executed clothesline display is genuine social currency in this neighborhood ecosystem. It communicates to everyone within visual range that you are managing your domestic responsibilities with complete competence, even when every other aspect of daily life is operating somewhere between controlled instability and quiet crisis. So when you encounter a vintage photograph featuring a perfectly ordered clothesline in a 1950s suburban backyard, recognize what you're actually seeing. That's not just laundry. That's a weekly performance, a silent communication, a carefully executed public message that says, everything here is entirely under control. One misplaced item and the entire message gets reinterpreted. The lawn, where neighborly competition goes to live permanently. Maintaining appropriate appearances in the 1950s suburb extends well beyond the interior of your home and the contents of your clothesline. It reaches down into the actual ground beneath your feet. The lawn must be maintained at the correct height. The roses must have their spent blooms removed on schedule. And if your dandelions migrate across the property boundary line into your neighbor's yard, you should begin preparing for a level of passive social consequence that will outlast several growing seasons. In 1950s suburbia, the grass on your side of the fence isn't simply grass. It's a continuous public statement about your character, your values, and your fundamental commitment to the neighborhood's collective standards. The first operational principle of suburban lawn management: you are under continuous observation. Mrs. Jensen, positioned 3 properties down the street, maintains a viewing post behind her lace curtains with optical equipment normally reserved for serious bird watching. Mr. Tompkins has established a pattern of early morning strolls past every property on the block, hands clasped with apparent casualness behind his back, mentally cataloging which lawns received mowing attention last week and which are beginning to communicate a troubling drift toward natural growth. Your own day begins with intelligence gathering. Coffee in hand, you conduct a preliminary assessment of the competitive landscape. The opposition, also known as your neighbors, are already deployed in their front gardens, wielding their trowels with an intentionality that communicates serious purpose. The air carries the combined fragrance of freshly cut grass and competitive anxiety in roughly equal proportions. The dandelion threat assessment. You spot it immediately. A single dandelion has established itself at the edge of your front walkway overnight, presenting its cheerful yellow face to the morning with complete indifference to the social complications it represents. You experience a chill that has nothing to do with the morning temperature. One dandelion operates as a forward position. Left unaddressed, it becomes 20. Left further unaddressed, you become the property that features in cautionary conversations about declining neighborhood standards. You remove it with the focused urgency of someone diffusing a device with a countdown timer. The unwritten regulations governing lawn maintenance are as strategically complex as a competitive board game, but conducted outdoors with more perspiration. The grass must be maintained at a height that communicates care without suggesting desperate overattention. Mowing occurs on a weekly schedule, but not on the same day as the Johnson family, which would imply that you're following their lead rather than establishing your own independent lawn care calendar. Clippings must be collected and removed immediately after mowing. Leaving them visible signals a level of casual approach to lawn care that generates neighborhood commentary within hours. Any fertilizer applications must be conducted with subtle restraint. Visible chemical application, patches of unnaturally intense green color, or any aromatic evidence detectable from the sidewalk creates its own category of conversational material at the next coffee morning. Flower bed management operates as an entirely separate competitive division. Roses receive daily attention to remove spent blooms. Tulips must maintain upright posture without visible assistance. Marigolds must not sprawl beyond their designated boundaries under any circumstances. If your sweet peas develop ambitions that exceed their structural capacity, you provide staking support and maintain public confidence. If the hydrangeas exhibit signs of drought stress, you discuss the weather extensively in any conversation that might touch on the subject. Mrs. Jensen is taking notes for her next communication with your mother-in-law throughout all of this. The equipment arms race. Front porch presentation gets quietly weaponized within the overall competitive framework. A well-selected and properly maintained door wreath communicates. This household has its collective situation managed. A chipped or faded flower container is the visual equivalent of a formal surrender announcement. Lawn ornaments require careful navigation. One decorative pink flamingo reads as charming personal expression. Two reads as questionable taste. Three communicates that you've made a definitive decision about your relationship with neighborhood opinion and are prepared to live with the consequences. Wind chimes are acceptable if they produce gentle tones. Anything with greater acoustic presence registers as a declaration of hostility toward the surrounding properties. The most significant competitive escalation arrives when any neighbor introduces new lawn care equipment. The morning Mr. Tompkins deploys a brand new push mower featuring gleaming chrome finishing details. A ripple effect moves through the entire neighborhood with the speed of genuine news. Hardware stores within a reasonable driving radius report depleted upgrade inventory by dinner time. You find yourself explaining to your husband that the previous mower has developed safety concerns that make its continued operation inadvisable, and that the replacement model you've identified would represent a sound household investment. Watering schedules are closely guarded strategic intelligence. Insufficient watering produces grass that produces audible sounds underfoot, which neighbors interpret as evidence of neglect. Excessive watering produces an almost suspicious level of lush growth and generates questions about your water usage at the next neighborhood gathering. The precise calibration point is the one that produces enviable results on your side of the property line, while remaining impossible for anyone to definitively identify as deliberate competitive strategy. Nobody ever definitively wins this particular ongoing competition. You collapse indoors eventually, with grass residue on your hands and genuine uncertainty about whether the sustained effort justifies the outcome. But tomorrow morning, you'll position yourself at the window with your coffee. Notice that Mrs. Jensen's begonias are displaying unusual vitality, and the entire cycle recommences without any formal announcement. Because in 1950s suburbia, the real growth occurring isn't in the flower beds. It's in the continuous quiet competition that keeps everyone trimming and weeding and performing contentment, all for a sense of belonging that apparently depends significantly on never allowing your dandelions to develop opinions about property boundaries. The grocery store, an Olympic event with produce. Grocery shopping in the 1950s is considerably less about acquiring necessary food items and considerably more about navigating an elaborately structured obstacle course populated by acquaintances, quiet rivals, and the store manager who has developed strong personal opinions about your margarine selections. Proper etiquette demands continuous smiling, appropriate nodding, and absolutely never purchasing more than 2 cans of any processed meat product in a single transaction. The neighbors will draw conclusions. It's Tuesday morning and you've arrived armed with a precisely organized shopping list written on good notepaper, a sensible handbag that coordinates with your shoes, and a quietly burning hope that you won't encounter Mrs. Johnson before you've had adequate opportunity to arrange your hair into something that communicates competence. You step into the fluorescent brightness of the local market and immediately register the ambient tension. Every woman present is here for the identical underlying reason: to be observed and to perform convincing indifference to being observed. The produce section presents the opening challenge. Bananas receive individual ripeness assessments. Apples get tested for appropriate firmness with a touch that communicates expertise without aggression. Citrus items must be rotated and subjected to olfactory evaluation as though you're conducting a professional tasting for a citrus-focused publication. The unspoken regulations are clear. Never subject more than 3 avocados to squeezing examination in succession. Never reach for the final remaining bunch of any herb. Extend your hand toward the last available parsley, and you'll receive the specific variety of cold stare that Mrs. Jenkins reserves for people who threaten her chicken salad supremacy. The canned goods political landscape. The canned goods aisle represents a complex political territory where alliances form and dissolve around brand loyalty and purchasing decisions. Here the performance becomes particularly demanding. You must project an image that balances thrift with dignity at every shelf. Generic peas, acceptable. Off-brand tomato soup, a statement you may not intend to make. Canned tuna, safely neutral territory. Anything in the cream chip beef category should be acquired, if acquired at all, while concealed beneath a protective layer of respectable canned fruit selections. Cart navigation through the store dramatically increases your probability of social encounters. There's always someone requiring conversation. A PTA acquaintance. A neighbor processing opinions about the current state of the local park equipment. The store manager conducting his aisle patrol with the quiet authority of someone who considers your purchasing decisions a reflection of neighborhood standards. You exchange pleasantries with practiced warmth while simultaneously constructing a plausible explanation for the unusually large cracker quantity in your cart. Bridge night preparations. Naturally. The maraschino cherries are for a special occasion that you're prepared to describe in vague but convincing terms if pressed. The frozen food section offers both relief from social pressure and introduces entirely new conversational risks. Reaching toward the frozen peas requires physical proximity to other shoppers, which can result in spontaneous 15-minute conversations about optimal leftover reheating methodology. This is not always unwelcome, but it does affect your schedule considerably. The meat counter social hierarchy. The meat counter operates as the grocery store's primary social stratification zone, where the butcher functions simultaneously as essential service provider and quiet community gatekeeper. Your cut selection requires careful calibration. Nothing so expensive that it communicates financial extravagance. Nothing so economical that it suggests domestic austerity. The middle range represents respectable competence without drawing commentary in either direction. Unless Mrs. Parker happens to be making her own selections at precisely the same moment, in which case she will examine your choice with the focused attention of an appraiser and inquire with sweet concern whether that's a roast again, projecting the mild implication that you're feeding a small residential establishment rather than a family. The dairy section presents its own etiquette gauntlet in concentrated form. Whole milk communicates traditional household values. Reduced fat milk signals awareness of contemporary health thinking. Margarine, a genuine gamble with social implications that extend into the following week's coffee morning. Butter, a confident statement about your household's priorities. Both butter and margarine in the same cart. People will develop theories about what kind of domestic operation you're actually running. Powdered milk, if it must appear in your cart at all, gets positioned under everything else with the careful concealment of an item that could support either interpretation of your household management philosophy. The checkout line provides the final examination. You arrange your items on the belt with labels oriented outward, projecting the image of a woman whose relationship with consumer products is organized and intentional. Conversation with the cashier about weather conditions remains the safest available topic. And you maintain a studied indifference to the sensation of Mrs. Jensen's eyes conducting a complete inventory of every item you're purchasing. Because acknowledging her attention would require acknowledging that you're aware of being evaluated, which would mean acknowledging the entire system, and nobody does that. You return to your vehicle with bags in hand, having successfully completed another weekly performance. Did the smile maintain its correct warmth throughout? Was the convenience-food ratio defensible? Did Mrs. Jenkins register the presence of the boxed baking mix? You exhale with the particular relief of someone who has just completed a competitive event they weren't entirely certain they could finish. Because in 1950s suburbia, grocery shopping isn't fundamentally about food acquisition. It's a weekly athletic event where every aisle presents another opportunity to demonstrate that you belong here, that your standards are maintained, and that your purchasing decisions would withstand examination by anyone with strong opinions about off-brand tomato soup. Ironing, a lifestyle commitment with no exit strategy. Ironing in the 1950s isn't a household task. It's a complete personal philosophy. Every garment, every napkin, every pillowcase, and every item of table linen must be pressed to a standard of crispness that doesn't exist naturally in the physical world. And you must perform this activity with apparent contentment, or at minimum with an expression suggesting contentment. Because admitting that you find it anything less than satisfying is essentially conceding defeat to the wrinkles, and the wrinkles cannot be allowed to win. Let's begin with the equipment. The iron of this era isn't a lightweight contemporary device with programmable steam settings and a non-stick sole plate that glides effortlessly over any fabric. It's a substantial chrome-plated instrument of considerable physical weight that functions simultaneously as a muscle-building apparatus and a blunt object suitable for self-defense against anyone who suggests that wrinkle-resistant fabric might someday become a viable household option. The ironing board produces a specific creak of resignation as you unfold it each morning. Its cover is decorated with a personal history of faded scorch marks, each one a small memorial to a moment of distraction or an overheated iron left in contact with fabric approximately 30 seconds longer than the situation required. The ritual begins with careful organization. Your husband's professional shirts occupy the first position in the queue. These must impress his employer and by extension reflect well on the household that produced them. School uniforms follow immediately. These must withstand the scrutiny of teachers and parents at drop-off. Your own blouses come next, which carries a particular irony. You will spend considerable focused effort pressing them into perfect condition, then cover them entirely with an apron approximately 4 minutes after putting them on. The napkin situation and social survival. Then come the napkins, the handkerchiefs, and on mornings when your standards are operating at peak ambition, the top sheet. Because the possibility of a guest glimpsing a single crease through the coverlet represents a social risk you're not prepared to accept. You fill the iron's water reservoir, connect it to the electrical supply, and wait for the reassuring hiss of steam that communicates. This household is managing its affairs. For the next 45 minutes, your home fills with the particular combination of heated cotton and quiet determination that defines this era's domestic mornings. You press each shirt with the precision of someone preparing military dress uniforms for a formal inspection. Collar first, sleeves in their correct sequence. Body panels in order. Every movement participates in a practiced physical rhythm. Lift, position, smooth, press, advance, repeat. Any interruption in this sequence, an incoming telephone call, a child requiring immediate mediation, an unexpected breeze through the window that deposits something onto your freshly pressed work, carries genuine consequences. A permanent crease incorrectly placed becomes a lasting record of the moment your concentration lapsed, and a new entry in the quiet, ongoing neighborhood assessment of your domestic standards. In this period of history, visible wrinkles in clothing don't simply communicate that someone got dressed in a hurry this morning. They communicate that the household's organizational framework may be experiencing structural difficulties. The fear of a surprise inspection is entirely legitimate. Your mother-in-law might appear without warning. A neighbor might stop by for coffee. The visiting minister might require a clean napkin under circumstances that cannot be anticipated. Any evidence of an ironing session that was shortened or skipped entirely is an open invitation for gentle but pointed advisory comments. Have you been experimenting with a slightly cooler iron temperature, dear? These observations carry weight. Cloth napkins deserve specific attention here. They are non-negotiable for any household with legitimate aspirations toward middle-class respectability, and they must be pressed with a commitment that treats each corner as a precision engineering project. The fold must be geometrically correct. The crease must be sharp enough to serve a functional secondary purpose. Paper napkins exist and are available for purchase, but their appropriate deployment is restricted to outdoor eating occasions, genuine household emergencies, or households that have made specific and deliberate choices about their relationship with neighborhood opinion. Even the post-ironing garment transfer carries its own protocol. Shirts must be moved to their hangers with movements that preserve every pressed surface completely. A poorly executed transfer can undo 30 minutes of focused effort in a single moment of casual handling. The emotional weight of this outcome is not inconsiderable. Contemporary life offers multiple alternatives. Spray products that release fabric wrinkles, permanent press fabric construction, dryer settings that approximate pressing results. But in the 1950s, you're engaged in a war with fabric physics that has no armistice available. Your only operational assets are physical effort and the privately maintained fantasy that somewhere there exists a woman who genuinely enjoys ironing and isn't simply performing enjoyment for an audience. Ironing isn't just what you do with fabric, it's what you do with your reputation. You press forward in the most literal sense available, smiling through the steam and the scheduled commitment and the daily contest against entropy. Because everyone in the neighborhood understands the fundamental truth. The moment your vigilance relaxes, the wrinkles advance, and the entire carefully constructed order of suburban life might begin unraveling at exactly the point where your pillowcase crease should be. The dinner party, navigating a social minefield in your best dress. Hosting a dinner party requires a specific combination of skills that would be genuinely impressive on any professional resume. The strategic thinking of a logistics coordinator, the interpersonal management of a hostage negotiator, and the performance endurance of a professional stage actor running 8 shows a week. Your conversational contributions must be carefully calibrated for harmlessness. Your laughter must arrive at precisely the right moments and in precisely the right quantity. Your casserole must emerge from the oven with its structural integrity intact. And if the conversation develops a dangerous tendency toward genuine interest, you redirect it immediately toward bridge scores or the current weather situation. Anything more substantive simply isn't done. Picture the full scene. It's Saturday evening and you're in complete operational dress, a properly pressed outfit, your good pearls, and an apron that functions essentially as ceremonial armor. The table achieves a level of gleam that required the better part of an afternoon to accomplish. The good china is deployed. Each place setting has been positioned with the precision of a geometry exercise. Candles provide flickering illumination with the specific quality of desperate optimism, suggesting an evening of genuine sophistication, and absolutely not a repetition of the unfortunate incident involving the ham at last month's gathering. The doorbell announces the beginning. Guests arrive in coordinated outfits, bearing wine bottles and the particular brand of manufactured enthusiasm produced by people who are genuinely fond of you but would, in an honest world, be at home in comfortable clothes watching television. You greet everyone with the specific brightness you normally reserve for receiving an unexpected tax refund or observing a child successfully nap. Outdoor shoes get exchanged for house-appropriate footwear at the entrance. Nobody wants scuff marks on recently cleaned floors, and the social performance commences before the roast has been in the oven long enough to matter. The conversational management system. The evening's choreography is strictly structured. Cocktails in the living room, where small appetizers on appropriately sized plates circulate, and everyone laughs at Mr. Bennett's story about his car trouble with the consistent enthusiasm that suggests this is either the first time they've heard it or they're too polite to indicate otherwise. Each guest occupies a predetermined social role. The neighbor who reintroduces last winter's snowstorm into conversation with the persistence of someone who finds it genuinely unresolved. The friend recently returned from European travel. The husband who has been delivering the identical office party anecdote at every social gathering since 1953, without any apparent awareness that the story has achieved complete familiarity across its entire audience. Your responsibility throughout all of this is to maintain the conversational machinery in continuous operation, distributing attention and agreement with the even-handed efficiency of an air traffic controller, managing multiple simultaneous arrivals. The meal itself requires both culinary competence and emotional management operating simultaneously. Dishes arrive at the table with appropriate presentation. Side items get introduced with the measured ceremony of significant announcements. If something goes wrong, and something always has at least the potential to go wrong, a slightly overdone crust, a sauce that didn't achieve the intended consistency, you receive the setback with serene composure and redirect everyone's attention toward the company itself. Well, it really is all about the people, isn't it? Delivered with a smile that has never heard of embarrassment. Safe conversational topics rotate through the evening with the reliable predictability of seasonal programming. Weather patterns receive extended discussion. School-related developments get thorough coverage. Bridge game results provide reliable material. The current cost of grocery items generates consistent engagement. Politics, religious topics, and anything that might qualify as a genuine emotion get redirected toward the green beans before they can establish themselves in the conversation. Have you tried them with nutmeg? It makes a remarkable difference. The silences represent the most technically demanding moments of the evening. A conversational pause lasting more than 3 seconds requires immediate emergency response. You maintain a personal reserve of backup conversational material. Something amusing the milk delivery person said recently, the story about young Bobby and the incident with the freezer. If all reserves are depleted, complimenting someone's curtains provides reliable conversational restart capability. If their curtains aren't new, you compliment the existing ones with equal apparent enthusiasm. The objective is to keep the social engine running regardless of available fuel. Laughter requires precise management throughout the evening. Volume must remain within specific parameters. Too loud, and the room reassesses its impression of you. Too restrained, and something seems wrong that nobody can specifically identify. Genuine humor is relatively rare in these carefully managed social environments, but its absence is entirely irrelevant. What matters is the sustained performance of a room full of people who find each other consistently pleasant, and their immediate neighborhood entirely satisfactory, as a place to conduct their lives. When the final guest collects their coat and delivers their assessment of the evening as wonderful, you smile with the warmth of genuine connection and the relief of someone who has just successfully navigated a complex operational challenge. You've managed the conversational currents, maintained the casserole's structural integrity, and distributed laughter with professional precision. As the last car disappears down the street, you allow yourself a moment of genuine private relief. Then you begin clearing the table, already reviewing which moments came closest to genuine conversational danger, and making quiet mental notes for next month's performance adjustments. The mail system, suburban diplomacy in envelope form. Proof that sometimes correspondence isn't simply communication. It's a carefully constructed minefield of social obligation and strategic implication. Invitations must receive written responses within a time frame that communicates both enthusiasm and appropriate restraint. Thank you notes must be handwritten with penmanship that reflects your upbringing. And under absolutely no circumstances may you respond to any invitation with anything resembling a provisional commitment. The neighborhood maintains informal records of these things, and those records inform decisions about guest lists for years afterward. Let's establish the scene. The mail carrier arrives each afternoon wearing a precisely pressed uniform and projecting an air of cheerful efficiency, depositing envelopes into your mailbox with the regularity of a natural phenomenon. There's a daily anticipation associated with retrieving the day's delivery, perhaps something from a distant relative, possibly a catalog. But more frequently, a cream-colored envelope of a weight and quality that communicates serious intent before you've even broken the seal. The moment you identify those carefully formed letters, Mr. and Mrs., followed by your surname written in someone's best formal hand, you understand that you've entered territory where your response will be evaluated on multiple dimensions simultaneously. The governing regulations are clear and merciless in their application. An invitation received requires a written response within 3 days of receipt, preferably sooner. Promptness isn't simply encouraged here. It's the foundational demonstration that you function as a responsible participant in neighborhood social life. Anything slower and you've communicated something about your organizational capabilities and your level of regard for the person who extended the invitation. Both interpretations are unfavorable. The art of the written response. You compose your reply with the focused care of someone drafting a document with legal implications. Penmanship must be legible without being utilitarian. Tone must achieve the precise calibration between genuine warmth and appropriate restraint. "We would be absolutely delighted to attend" translates plainly as, "Of course we'll be there. Please don't discuss us unfavorably if we arrive 3 minutes late." The message is clear. The subtext is managed. The envelope gets sealed and posted within 24 hours of the invitation's arrival. Thank you notes operate under their own separate but equally demanding code. Any gift received, regardless of whether it represents something you'll actually find useful or whether it's the third decorative item shaped like a lemon you've received this calendar year, requires formal written acknowledgement within 1 week. The notes must be handwritten. Typewritten responses communicate that you don't consider the relationship worth your personal time investment. Phone calls, despite being faster and arguably warmer, don't satisfy the requirement because they leave no physical evidence of your gratitude. Each word in a thank you note carries weight proportional to your relationship with the recipient and the social occasion involved. Write too briefly, and you appear insufficiently appreciative of the gesture. Write with excessive enthusiasm, and the recipient will understand immediately that you're compensating for something, quite possibly your genuine reaction to receiving a lemon-shaped soap dish, when what you actually needed was a reliable casserole dish. The RSVP represents the true social examination of the correspondence system. 2 responses exist: accept with pleasure or decline with sincere regret. The middle ground of tentative commitment doesn't exist in 1950s suburban social culture. Showing up to an event without having formally responded is essentially a theatrical declaration of social chaos, and you will be received at the door with a smile of such precisely controlled warmth that you'll spend the entire evening accurately, but unprovably certain that your name is being quietly repositioned on future invitation lists. Declining, a delicate art form. Even declining an invitation requires careful structural management. We regretfully find ourselves unable to attend due to prior commitment, must be delivered with sufficient specificity to be credible and sufficient vagueness to be unverifiable. The prior commitment in question might be anything from a genuine conflicting engagement to an evening you've simply designated for sitting in your own home without performing for an audience. Both are legitimate. Neither can be disclosed. Failing to respond to an invitation at all represents perhaps the most significant correspondence transgression available to a 1950s housewife. Your absence from the response will be noted with precision. Your motivations will be analyzed at the next coffee morning with the thoroughness of a professional investigation. Your name will begin appearing lower in the priority sequence when future invitations are being addressed. The social mathematics here are unforgiving. The strategic deployment of RSVPs as a social instrument is practiced by the more politically sophisticated members of every neighborhood. Accepting invitations from certain households while declining others creates a pattern of implied preference that communicates volumes without requiring a single explicit statement. The timing of your response adds additional information. A response arriving within hours suggests enthusiasm. One arriving at the 3-day limit suggests careful consideration of your options. Experts at this particular form of social navigation can construct and maintain complex alliance structures using nothing but stationery and postage. Invitations themselves must be produced to a standard that reflects the significance of the occasion and the regard in which you hold your guests. Handwritten in your best formal script, addressed with complete and correct honorifics, sealed in an envelope of appropriate weight, posted with sufficient advance notice for recipients to clear their schedules and acquire whatever clothing the occasion requires. A poorly executed invitation communicates that the recipient wasn't your first consideration when the guest list was being assembled, and this impression, once created, requires significant subsequent effort to correct. Compare all of this to the contemporary landscape of digital invitations, group text announcements, and event pages where people indicate their attendance status with a single button click. There's an efficiency to modern correspondence that the 1950s housewife would recognize as practical, but she would also understand correctly that something got lost in the translation. Every letter, every carefully composed reply, every strategically delayed or promptly delivered response was carrying information beyond its literal content. It was a small piece of the ongoing social negotiation that held the neighborhood together and kept everyone's position within it clearly understood. Competitive baking, where dessert becomes destiny. There is always pressure to arrive at any neighborhood gathering bearing a dessert of such impressive quality that it becomes a topic of conversation independent of the event itself. Your lemon meringue pie must achieve the exact correct balance between citrus tartness and sweetness. The meringue must reach a height and consistency that communicates genuine effort and technical skill. And if your pastry crust experiences shrinkage during baking, you should seriously consider whether a temporary relocation to a different neighborhood might serve everyone's interests more comfortably. Baking in the 1950s isn't a recreational activity or a creative outlet. It's a competitive discipline with real social stakes and a community of participants who are tracking results with more attention than they apply to most other aspects of neighborhood life. The kitchen becomes a competitive arena. Every mixing bowl and rolling pin is a piece of equipment in an ongoing contest for neighborhood approval that never formally begins and never officially concludes. You wake before the household on baking day, nerves already operational, and begin the ritual of assembling ingredients with the methodical focus of someone preparing for a performance that matters. Triple-checking the recipe against your memory of previous attempts. Hopping with genuine intensity that this particular occasion will be the one where the meringue maintains its structural ambitions from oven to serving table without experiencing a confidence crisis somewhere in transit. The regulations governing serious baking are precise. The recipe is treated as a foundational document, not a general suggestion. Lemons get juiced by hand rather than from a bottle, because the bottle represents a shortcut that experienced bakers can apparently detect in the finished product. Eggs get separated with the delicate, focused attention of a procedure where failure has visible consequences. The meringue gets beaten until it forms peaks of a firmness that could serve multiple household purposes, and sugar gets incorporated gradually, because the alternative is a cautionary tale you've heard from multiple sources. The transit crisis and the public judgment. The pastry crust deserves its own extended analysis. One temperature variation, one oven running slightly hot in a particular corner, one moment of distraction during the blind baking stage, and the crust pulls away from the edges of the pan and collapses into a shape that communicates failure with remarkable visual clarity. You then face the decision of whether to present it anyway with sufficient confidence to discourage close examination, or whether to identify the nearest alternative dessert option and revise your plan entirely. As the pie bakes, the neighborhood's awareness of your activity increases proportionally with the fragrance escaping through your kitchen window. Every open window in this era is a two-way communication channel. The smell of lemon filling drifting through the morning air announces both your ambition and your vulnerability. If you're known for your baking, expectations have been established by your own previous performance. Falling short of them isn't simply a personal disappointment, it's a public event. Transporting the finished pie to its destination requires the physical focus and emotional investment of someone moving something genuinely irreplaceable. You position it in the vehicle with the care appropriate for fragile cargo of significant value. You drive with awareness of every road surface variation and every braking situation. You arrive at the gathering and carry the pie inside with the outward nonchalance of someone who didn't spend the entire journey managing anxiety about meringue stability. The evaluation begins before the first slice is served. A gathering of women who all bake seriously creates an atmosphere where desserts get assessed with a thoroughness that most professional food critics don't apply to restaurant meals. The height of the meringue, the color of the crust, the clarity of the filling visible through the serving dish. All of this information gets processed and filed before anyone has reached for the serving utensil. Compliments, when they arrive, require careful interpretation. You always produce such consistent results, might be genuine admiration or might be a subtle observation about your predictability. I don't know how you achieve that meringue height, could be sincere curiosity or competitive intelligence gathering. You receive every comment with gracious modesty and attempt to extract its actual meaning later, in the privacy of your own kitchen. The pie that disappears first from the dessert table wins something that has no formal name but is universally understood. The pie that remains partially present at the evening's end communicates something equally clear and equally without formal acknowledgement. Both outcomes get remembered and referenced in future conversations about baking, sometimes for years. The PTA Meeting, diplomatic relations in a school gymnasium. School organization meetings sound like a civic activity undertaken by parents who share a common interest in their children's educational experience. They are not. They are carefully managed political environments where every contribution gets evaluated for its implications, every silence gets interpreted for its meaning, and suggesting any change to established procedures, regardless of how genuinely reasonable the suggestion might be, carries social risks that extend well beyond the meeting itself. It's 7 in the evening, and you've claimed a folding chair that's making its discomfort known in specific ways, clutching a notebook that contains more margin artwork than actual notes. The surrounding parents are assembling with the specific energy of people who came because their absence would be noted and interpreted unfavorably. There's coffee available on a folding table, a plate of cookies in a condition best described as having seen better days, and the persistent presence of chalk dust and unspoken interpersonal history. Nobody is here because this is how they choose to spend a Tuesday evening with complete freedom of choice. Everyone is here because attendance communicates investment in the school community, and non-attendance communicates its own message that nobody wants communicated on their behalf. The meeting's internal politics. The opening minutes demonstrate suburban diplomatic skills operating at a sophisticated level. The PTA president, who possesses a vocal cheerfulness that carries undertones of genuine authority, calls the gathering to order with reminders about the constructive and collaborative spirit expected from all participants. This is understood by everyone present as a specific reference to not raising the budget allocation controversy again, and not asking publicly what happened to the playground equipment that was approved 2 years ago and has yet to materialize. Everyone nods with appropriate gravity. Private thoughts remain private. The reading of previous meeting minutes gets delivered with a commitment to procedural accuracy that would be genuinely impressive if anyone in the room was experiencing genuine engagement with the content. You develop the correct ratio of attentive nodding, sufficient to communicate presence without suggesting that you've identified yourself as someone available for additional volunteer commitments. Raising your hand in this environment carries risks that require advanced risk assessment. Seeking clarification on a procedural point can result in being assigned responsibility for that procedure going forward. Offering a comment can generate an invitation to join the committee addressing the relevant topic. The connection between participation and obligation is direct and swift. Fundraising discussion generates the meeting's most active conversational period. Suggestions emerge and get evaluated according to an unspoken but clearly understood framework. You must never criticize a suggestion with directness. The correct approach involves expressing enthusiasm for the underlying concept while introducing practical considerations that effectively neutralize the proposal without anyone being able to identify you as the source of its defeat. That's such a creative direction. I wonder whether the scheduling might present some challenges given everything else we have on the calendar. This communicates opposition while maintaining the surface appearance of collaborative problem solving. Innovation carries genuine risk. The community still references, with a specific tone that communicates ongoing consequences, the occasion when Mrs. Jensen proposed repainting the gymnasium in a non-traditional color during a meeting several years ago. She continues to manage the lost property table as a result. The lesson has been thoroughly absorbed by everyone who witnessed the aftermath. The correct strategic position involves volunteering for tasks that demonstrate your commitment to the community without placing you in positions where outcomes depend on factors outside your control, or where failure would be publicly visible. Counting event tickets, folding programs, organizing the sign-in table. These contributions get noticed and appreciated without creating exposure to consequences. When the meeting concludes after what feels like a considerably longer period than the clock actually records, you stand, apply a brief and discreet stretch to your posture, and conduct the exit phase of the evening's performance. Warm exchanges with nearby parents, commitments to see everyone next month delivered with genuine-sounding enthusiasm, the careful navigation of the parking lot's informal social clusters. Driving home, you conduct a quiet review of the evening's performance. Did your expression remain appropriately neutral when the gymnasium curtain topic briefly surfaced? Did anyone register the slight involuntary response that you thought you successfully concealed? Probably. That's the specific mechanism by which neighborhood legends develop their foundational material. The Beauty Parlor, intelligence headquarters with better lighting. Every week, you're expected to present yourself at the local beauty establishment like an athlete preparing for competition, except the competition involves significantly more hairspray, and the stakes are measured in social currency rather than athletic achievement. The actual hair styling, while technically the stated purpose of the visit, is not the primary activity being conducted. The primary activity is navigating an intelligence gathering and distribution network of remarkable sophistication, where your ability to express the correct level of surprise at the correct information at the correct moment determines your standing in the neighborhood's social architecture. It's Friday morning, and the beauty parlor is already operating at full conversational capacity. The steady background sound of rollers and processing equipment provides audio cover for a dozen simultaneous conversations, each one carrying information about neighborhood developments that the participants consider newsworthy. The fragrance of chemical processing solutions mingles with the collective aromatic contributions of multiple competing perfumes, creating an environment that is simultaneously overwhelming and oddly comfortable in its familiarity. You settle into the available styling chair, positioning your magazine not for reading, but as a protective barrier against unsolicited direct engagement, before you've had adequate opportunity to assess the day's conversational landscape. Your stylist approaches with professional implements and the specific expression of someone who, is both the repository of considerable information and the potential source of considerable information, depending on how the morning develops. The intelligence exchange protocol. The conversational opening moves through safe territory with practiced efficiency. Whether the recent church organization event, someone's garden competition results, but the transition to more substantive material happens with a speed that suggests everyone present has been waiting with some impatience for the preliminary courtesies to conclude. Did you happen to notice that Betty has been receiving an unusual amount of mail delivery lately? This apparently innocent observation activates a chain reaction that within minutes has the entire establishment engaged in collaborative analysis of multiple neighborhood developments simultaneously. Mrs. Peterson's shopping patterns. The reason Mr. Jenkins maintains such consistently late professional hours. The meaning of the Johnson family's decision to repaint their back fence in a color that communicates something, though there's active discussion about what exactly. Positioned under the processing equipment, you enter the most technically demanding phase of the morning. Your reactions must be calibrated to communicate exactly the right combination of appropriate surprise, measured sympathy, and casual awareness. Express too much interest, and your specific reaction becomes tomorrow's conversational material in this same location. Express insufficient interest, and you communicate either that you already possess this information, which requires its own explanation, or that you don't consider the source reliable, which creates its own complications. Your own contributions to the morning's information exchange require advanced strategic planning. A harmless personal disclosure, something involving a minor domestic mishap or a children's amusing incident, generates warmth and reciprocal sharing from others without creating material that could circulate through the neighborhood in ways you haven't anticipated and approved. Revealing anything that touches on genuine household difficulties, marital complications, or personal doubts of any kind is understood by every experienced participant to be a serious strategic error, whose consequences will be felt for multiple subsequent weeks. The hair itself receives professional attention throughout all of this social navigation. Curled, set, processed, and finished to a specification that represents your community's current understanding of appropriate feminine presentation. The finished result is a structural achievement of impressive stability, resistant to most atmospheric conditions the Midwest can produce, and communicating through its very solidity that you are a woman who maintains her standards. Payment gets made. The tip gets calculated generously because your stylist possesses information about you and your household that you'd prefer remained within the established confidential relationship. Exit pleasantries get exchanged at the reception area, including at least one parting observation that carries more layered meaning than its surface content suggests. Do give my regards to your husband. Delivered with a smile that contains a complete paragraph of subtext you'll be analyzing during the drive home. You step back into the morning air with your hair impeccably structured, your social position maintained, your personal information secured, and the week's neighborhood intelligence assessment completed. Until next Friday, when the entire performance repeats with whatever new developments the week has generated for communal processing. Because in the 1950s beauty parlor, the most important thing being styled isn't your hair. It's the story about yourself that you're allowing to circulate, and the information about others that you're carefully choosing to contribute or withhold. It's espionage conducted with styling implements, and everyone in those chairs understands exactly what's actually happening, while maintaining perfect collective agreement that it's simply a pleasant weekly social gathering among friends. The controlled breakdown, emotional crisis with proper etiquette. At some identifiable point in any given week, the accumulated pressure of maintaining impossible standards across every dimension of domestic existence reaches a threshold that even the most composed housewife cannot sustain indefinitely. Whether this manifests as a quiet crying session in the linen closet or an extended neighborhood walk that began as a 10-minute errand, and expanded organically into a 3-hour personal processing expedition. There are regulations governing this too. You must emerge from whatever private space absorbed your temporary collapse with your hair properly arranged, your expression reassembled into its functional configuration, and your emotional crisis tastefully and completely denied to anyone who inquires. Picture the specific scene. It's Thursday afternoon. The family dog has conducted an enthusiastic tour of your freshly cleaned kitchen floor, leaving a detailed record of his outdoor activities across every surface you spent the morning restoring. The protein item designated for this evening's dinner remains in a completely frozen state despite having been removed from the icebox 2 hours ago with the optimistic assumption that it would cooperate with your timeline. Your youngest child has just completed an ambitious creative project using grape jelly as the primary medium, with your recently laundered living room curtain panels serving as the canvas. You stand in the kitchen doorway, holding a dish towel with the grip of someone holding the last stable object in a shifting landscape, and feel the first unmistakable internal tremors of a complete domestic breakdown gathering force somewhere beneath your professionally maintained exterior. But this is the 1950s. Emotional displays in any publicly accessible location are reserved for daytime radio dramas and households whose difficulties are considered appropriate subjects for neighborhood discussion. Public breakdowns belong to soap opera characters and people whose domestic situations are already understood to be complicated. So you excuse yourself from the immediate disaster zone with the graceful composure of someone stepping away to attend to a minor personal matter, navigate down the hallway with controlled urgency, and wedge yourself into the linen closet with a sigh that carries the accumulated weight of approximately 6 consecutive days of sustained performance. The private processing space. Here, surrounded by the fragrance of lavender sachets and towels that carry the faint mustiness of items stored with more optimism than ventilation, you finally allow the carefully maintained exterior to experience a temporary operational pause. You permit yourself a measured period of silent internal commentary about the unreasonable nature of current circumstances. Perhaps a brief, carefully contained crying episode. Possibly a quiet but comprehensive monologue addressing the question of who exactly decided that pillowcases require starching and what evidence supports their position. You allow yourself the private fantasy of boarding any available transportation to a major metropolitan area under an assumed identity, or at minimum retreating to the garage until the current decade concludes and presumably more reasonable standards emerge. Even the breakdown itself must be conducted with appropriate etiquette. Tissues are stored in advance at strategic locations throughout the household, behind the spare bedding, inside the sewing supply container, tucked into the front pocket of your utility apron. Because nothing communicates genuine composure quite like the ability to manage your own emotional response without conducting a visible search for supplies in the process. If the episode involves tears, you address the resulting evidence before exiting. A light pinch to both cheeks restores color that the crying removed. If the episode involved a stronger emotional response, you smooth your hair back into its correct position, straighten your clothing, and practice your standard expression in the hallway mirror until it achieves the correct combination of slight fatigue and complete fundamental wellness. The outdoor alternative carries its own established protocol. A brisk walk around the neighborhood block is a recognized and understood social communication. No neighbor who observes a housewife completing circuits of the block with her jaw set and her gaze fixed on a point in the middle distance approximately 15 feet ahead of her will inquire about the specifics of the situation. Sometimes a moment of wordless acknowledgement passes between two housewives traveling in opposite directions around the same block, both conducting the same private processing exercise, maintaining the fiction of a pleasant afternoon constitutional for anyone observing from a window. The return to operations. When the storm has passed its peak intensity and the internal landscape has stabilized to a manageable level, you let yourself back into the house with a quiet click of the latch. Survey the outstanding domestic challenges that preceded your brief absence and begin the methodical process of restoring visible order. The grape jelly curtain situation gets addressed. Dinner preparations resume with whatever alternative protein option the freezer can contribute on short notice. The appropriate background humming communicates to any household members who might be monitoring the situation that the meteorological event has concluded and normal operating conditions have been restored. When your husband arrives home that evening and the standard greeting performance commences, you execute it with the same practiced warmth as every other evening. Should he inquire whether everything is all right, perhaps registering some barely detectable variation in your standard presentation, the correct response is always the same. Of course, just a slightly tiring afternoon. Nothing more specific. Nothing that would require explanation or follow-up inquiry. The regulations seem, from any reasonable external perspective, completely unreasonable. And they are. But within those regulations exists a strange structural comfort. The framework itself becomes the scaffolding that keeps the household's visible presentation upright during moments when the person maintaining it is experiencing significant internal instability. Every woman in the neighborhood is navigating the same requirement. Everyone beneath the surface is managing their private reality while maintaining their public performance. The shared understanding of this, never discussed directly but universally comprehended, creates its own quiet form of community. So should you find yourself approaching the threshold on any given Thursday afternoon, remember that the etiquette extends even to your lowest moments. Have your private collapse in whatever space is available. Reassemble your presentation with whatever implements are at hand. Step back into the household's operational requirements with whatever reserves of composure you can access. After all, perfection is a story everyone in the neighborhood is telling simultaneously, and nobody actually believes it about anyone else. But surviving the day, private difficulties and all, is a genuine quiet achievement that deserves acknowledgement, even if the only person who will ever know the full truth of it is you. Company towels, the untouchable textile achievement. The towels occupying the guest bathroom towel rack, folded into geometric precision, and positioned with the careful intentionality of display objects in a museum case, represent one of the 1950s Housewife's most sophisticated domestic performances. These towels exist in a category entirely separate from towels that perform the functional purpose of drying human hands. They have been starched into rectangular permanence. They may have been lightly treated with the same fragrance used by well-dressed relatives at formal occasions, and using one of them for its apparent intended purpose would constitute a social transgression of a severity that would require considerable subsequent effort to address. If your hands require drying after using the guest facilities, the correct solution is your skirt, discreetly, while ensuring that nobody is positioned to observe this particular solution to the towel situation. It's a Saturday morning, and you're conducting the weekly household assessment. The bathroom has achieved its required level of gleam. The soap dish sits at its precisely correct angle, and there on the designated rack, your genuine source of both pride and ambient anxiety, 2 immaculate company towels, folded with creases so sharp they could serve secondary functions, positioned with their decorative elements facing appropriately outward. You don't remember exactly when this ritual established itself in your household's operating procedures, but you understand with complete clarity that it will continue indefinitely as long as any neighbor, friend, relative, or acquaintance might conceivably pass through your guest bathroom and form impressions based on what they encounter there. The sacred display object. The presentation requirements for company towels are specific and non-negotiable. They must appear completely undisturbed, carrying the visual quality of items that exist for contemplation rather than use. They must be starched to the point where they maintain their folded configuration without assistance from the towel bar itself. They must be arranged so that any monogramming or decorative border faces outward toward the room in an orientation that communicates intentionality. And they must be treated with a light application of a refined fragrance, the kind associated with department stores and relatives who own more than one complete set of good china. The ordinary functional towels that household members actually use for hand drying get stored in a location that removes them from any possibility of guest observation. Behind the radiator, inside the vanity cabinet, in a drawer that doesn't open unless you know its specific technique, ready for genuine household emergencies, which in this context means situations involving cosmetic accidents or minor plumbing events rather than the simple act of having washed your hands. You instruct the children with the gravity appropriate for important household regulations. The company towels are not for touching. You remind your husband periodically, because he will forget and use one during the exact visit from your mother-in-law, when discovery would cause maximum social complications. The moment she notices the faintest irregularity in the towel's perfect folding, a single small compression in the fabric's crisp surface, you will hear about it in a tone of voice so perfectly calibrated between sweet concern and quiet judgment that it will occupy a small, persistent space in your memory for the following week. "Oh, I see you've been using your nice towels," she'll observe, with the vocal warmth of someone expressing genuine care about your household management decisions. How lovely! The subtext of this observation could support multiple interpretive approaches, none of them entirely comfortable. Guests who are unfamiliar with the company towel system, and these guests do exist, represent the most delicate management challenge the guest bathroom presents. They enter the bathroom, observe the towels, identify them as towels, and use them for the purpose that towels exist to serve. The evidence is immediately and permanently visible: a slight compression in the fabric, a faint dampness, the displacement of the decorative fold by approximately half an inch from its correct position. You detect this the moment you conduct your next bathroom assessment, and the remainder of the social occasion involves a sustained internal effort to maintain your exterior warmth, while processing the knowledge that your company towels have been compromised and will require complete restoration before the next visitor arrives. The decoy system and damage control. The most strategically sophisticated housewives develop a decoy towel protocol. A second set of towels, slightly less perfect than the primary display items, gets positioned in front of the genuine company towels as a sacrificial offering for guests who don't recognize display objects when they encounter them. Other households rely on environmental communication. A subtle repositioning of the soap dish, a small decorative object placed in a location that communicates something to those familiar with the code, a single large seashell positioned in a way that suggests the towels are part of a deliberate aesthetic arrangement rather than functional items. Should the company towels be used and the situation discovered before replacement is possible, damage control requires immediate implementation. "Oh, they were just waiting to go into the laundry cycle," you explain, with a vocal quality that suggests this is entirely routine and completely anticipated. Your hands maintain their steadiness through the explanation, despite the internal experience of someone who has just witnessed something irreplaceable being treated as ordinary. The company towel situation is, viewed from a reasonable distance, completely absurd, and it absolutely is. But within the elaborate performance that is 1950s domestic life, it represents something that matters beyond its literal content. It's the household's commitment to being perpetually prepared for company. It's the physical embodiment of standards maintained even in spaces that most visitors will never enter. It's the difference between a household that has things under control and one that is simply managing as best it can. And in the 1950s, that distinction is communicated through the condition of towels that nobody is permitted to use. Carpool, the weekly logistics and diplomacy exercise. Managing the neighborhood carpool sounds like a practical cooperative arrangement between parents, with children attending the same school. It is a practical cooperative arrangement between parents with children attending the same school that also functions as a weekly evaluation of your reliability, your organizational capabilities, your vehicle's interior cleanliness standards, your knowledge of every participating child's dietary restrictions, and your ability to maintain cheerful composure while managing 6 small people in a moving vehicle during what is objectively one of the most chaotic experiences suburban life regularly produces. It's 7:05 in the morning, and you're examining a handwritten schedule that has been color-coded, cross-referenced, and annotated with enough supplementary information to qualify as a reference document. The telephone rings. One of the participating families is reporting a change in their child's availability due to a minor illness, which requires immediate recalculation of the vehicle's seating configuration and revision of the pickup sequence. In the background, your own children are conducting their morning warm-up activities, which today include a territorial dispute about seat assignments and a negotiation about snack preferences that has been ongoing since approximately yesterday. Being a carpool driver in the 1950s isn't a favor extended to your neighbors. It's a sacred operational trust with real social consequences attached to its performance. You are responsible for the safe and timely transport of multiple children, their associated educational materials, their musical instrument cases, and enough signed permission documentation to suggest a moderately complex bureaucratic undertaking. Your station wagon has been cleaned inside with the thoroughness you apply to surfaces that receive direct guest observation. Emergency supplies occupy the glove compartment. A complete supply of peppermint candies serves dual purposes as reward system and peace-maintaining diplomatic tool. The carpool performance standards. The journey itself operates according to its own specific etiquette requirements. Each child must be acknowledged by name upon boarding. Their parents' recent achievements must receive brief positive commentary. Their footwear must be assessed for mud content before they make contact with your upholstery. Every participating child's dietary sensitivities must be memorized with the accuracy you'd apply to medical information, because in this context it essentially is medical information. Johnny cannot have peanut products. Susie has a citrus sensitivity. Timmy's reaction to raisins begins with skin symptoms and escalates from there. Your hands maintain their position on the steering wheel at the 10 and 2 o'clock configuration throughout the journey, not because you've been specifically instructed to do so, but because anything less communicates a casual approach to the safety of other people's children that will be discussed among the participating families within hours of becoming observable. Conversation during transport must remain within parameters appropriate for the mixed audience of children and the implicit supervision of their absent parents. Academic subjects, teacher assessments that remain positive in their framing. Baseball card collection updates. Anything that touches on family finances, parental relationships, household difficulties, or any content that a child might reproduce at the dinner table that evening in a way that generates an uncomfortable phone call, requires immediate conversational redirection. Punctuality operates as the primary performance metric by which the carpool community evaluates its participants. Arriving even 2 minutes behind the established schedule initiates a chain reaction of consequences. Children waiting at the curb in any weather condition. Parents conducting visible watch checking that communicates their assessment of your organizational reliability. The specific variety of look exchanged between waiting parents when a carpool driver finally arrives that communicates a complete evaluation without requiring a single spoken word. Early arrival presents its own complications. Appearing too far in advance of the scheduled pickup time communicates either that you have nothing else occupying your morning, or that you're performing reliability for an audience. Neither interpretation is entirely welcome. The correct arrival timing exists in a narrow window that requires ongoing calibration based on your knowledge of each pickup location's specific logistical characteristics. The return journey produces its own management challenges. Children returning from school operate at energy levels that bear no relationship to the children who boarded the vehicle that morning. Backpacks multiply through what appears to be a spontaneous reproduction process. Snack packaging migrates to locations beneath the seating. A disagreement about a trading card's ownership, and therefore its value, and therefore its exchangeability, generates a conflict requiring mediation skills that a professional negotiator would find technically interesting. You deliver the final child to their home. You check the rear seating area for forgotten personal items, which today yields two mittens that don't match each other. You exhale with the specific quality of relief produced by the successful completion of a complex operation where multiple things could have gone wrong and somehow didn't. If your performance met the Carpool community's standards this week, no calls, no late arrivals, no forgotten children or overlooked clarinets, you might receive a brief complimentary acknowledgement at the next coffee morning. A small nod of approval that communicates, you handled it correctly again. These acknowledgments are rare and genuinely meaningful. Allow your standards to slip in any observable way, and the consequences arrive quietly but clearly. Your name begins appearing less frequently in the rotation discussion. Your children ask questions about why certain families don't share rides with you anymore that require answers involving levels of social complexity they're not yet equipped to process. And you find yourself assigned to cupcake production for the spring fundraising event, which everyone understands as a specific form of community service, assigned to those who have created a deficit in the social accounts. Closing, what the 1950s housewife teaches us about survival. And so here you are, drifting toward the comfortable edge of sleep, your metaphorical pearls slightly askew, your imagined lipstick still holding its position in your dreams. Tonight you've completed a guided tour through the elaborate social jungle that was everyday life for the 1950s American housewife. A world where salad forks had strategic implications, where a single unironed napkin could destabilize years of carefully accumulated social standing, and where the correct response to almost any situation was a composed smile and a rapid internal reassessment of your options. You've navigated the glove classification system and its attendant anxiety. You've witnessed the military precision of bedmaking as a twice-daily practice. You've observed breakfast being produced as a performance piece. You've watched the homecoming greeting get choreographed and executed with the commitment of a professional theatrical production. You've survived coffee mornings and Tupperware gatherings and the ongoing Hemline measurement crisis. You've consumed gelatin-based dishes of questionable content with maintained expressions of genuine appreciation. You've understood the food safety calculations being conducted beneath every buffet table. You've watched children being managed as tiny diplomatic representatives of their households. You've observed telephone answering being elevated to a performance art form. You've witnessed the 7-second transformation triggered by an unannounced visitor's vehicle. You've decoded the clothesline as a weekly public communication and the lawn as a continuous competitive arena. You've navigated the grocery store as a social evaluation environment. You've understood ironing as a philosophical commitment rather than a household task. You've survived dinner parties and decoded correspondence systems and witnessed competitive baking as genuine community drama. You've sat through PTA meetings as diplomatic engagements and understood the beauty parlor as an intelligence network. You've observed controlled emotional breakdowns conducted according to their own specific etiquette. You've understood company towels as a form of philosophical statement. And you've navigated the carpool as a weekly examination of your organizational character. The complicated truth beneath the performance. It would be straightforward to catalog all of this as pure absurdity, and we should absolutely acknowledge that significant portions of it were genuinely absurd. The pressures were unreasonable. The standards were impossible by design. The performance requirements were relentless, and the audience never fully left the premises. The rules were applied unevenly, and the cost of noncompliance fell almost entirely on the women who were expected to maintain the whole elaborate structure, while the broader culture discussed other things entirely. And yet, beneath the gloves and the hospital corners and the perfectly positioned company towels and the strategic napkin management, something else was operating simultaneously. A quiet and largely unacknowledged form of community maintenance. The coffee mornings and the Tupperware gatherings and the carpool rotations and the dinner parties were also the mechanisms through which neighborhoods held themselves together during a period of significant social transition. The post-war years produced real uncertainty. The rules, as suffocating as many of them were, provided structure during a period when structure was genuinely scarce. The women navigating these requirements weren't simply following instructions. They were building something: neighborhoods, community networks, social structures that provided support during difficulty even when that support couldn't be named directly or requested honestly. The neighbor who appeared with a casserole after a difficult week was operating within the etiquette system, but she was also simply showing up. The coffee morning that prohibited any topic of genuine emotional content was also the consistent weekly gathering where women who were otherwise isolated in their individual households encountered each other and confirmed that someone else was present and managing a similar situation. The courage involved in maintaining impossible standards daily, in performing contentment when contentment wasn't the accurate description of the internal experience, in finding genuine humor in the Gelatin Salad and the Hemline Crisis and the company towels, was real courage. It was applied to objectives that don't fully deserve it, but it was real. What we carry forward. As you settle deeper into your actual contemporary bed, with its sheets in whatever condition they happen to be in tonight, and its pillows arranged according to no established system, and its general indifference to the opinions of anyone not currently sleeping in it, consider what arrived with you from that era. Nobody is monitoring your towel folding methodology. Your hemline is your own business entirely. The gelatin situation is completely optional. You can answer your telephone, if you choose to answer it at all, in whatever clothes you happen to be wearing at the moment it rings. Your emotional responses are permitted to occur in accessible locations. Your grocery cart is not under surveillance. Your bed does not require military precision to justify your social standing. These are genuine freedoms that arrived through a long and complicated journey, and they're worth recognizing as such. But there's something worth carrying forward from the 1950s housewife's experience that has nothing to do with glove classification or ironing schedules. The capacity to find humor in impossible requirements. The ability to maintain composure during extended difficulty. The understanding that community requires maintenance, and that maintenance requires showing up consistently, even when showing up is inconvenient. And the recognition that other people are almost always managing something invisible that they're not discussing directly, and that this shared invisible management creates its own form of connection, even when the connection can't be named. The past is frequently absurd. The rules were often ridiculous. The standards were designed by and for a very specific and limited conception of what a life should look like. And yet the people inside those standards were doing what humans have always done, finding ways to endure, to build something together, to locate the humor in the impossible, and to keep going. History's funhouse produces strange reflections, but the people looking back at us from those reflections were real and complicated and frequently funnier about their situation than the situation deserved. That combination of realism and humor and endurance is maybe the most genuinely useful thing the 1950s housewife has to offer any of us navigating our own sets of impossible contemporary requirements. Sleep well. Your corners don't need to be hospital sharp, but if you find yourself making them that way anyway, at least you know exactly where that particular impulse originated.